Very good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock. On today's programme, have the UK and the US got a trade agreement over the line?
Donald Trump teases a major announcement later today. We'll see what a deal could look like.
Plenty of details to come on Thursday, the 8th of May. Sky News understands that the UK and US have reached a trade agreement, with an announcement expected from President Trump at 3 p.m. today. Pakistan's Prime Minister says India will pay the price after its deadly missile strikes, as Trump offers to help defuse the situation. We'll be live in Rome, where cardinals will undertake another vote this morning to decide who will be the next pope. Plus,
life had completely changed. We started family as 7, and then it was 3.
bittersweet reflections on today's Victory in Europe Day, as we hear from one survivor 8 decades since the war ended. And Arsenal's hopes of winning their first ever Champions League are over after they were beaten by Paris Saint-Germain in the semi-finals. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Breakfast. Reports this morning: President Trump poised to announce a trade agreement with the UK later today. The detail of any such agreement remains unclear, but pressure's been mounting on the White House to secure trade deals amid its global tariff war. British trade negotiators have been in Washington this week as the UK also pushed for a deal ahead of the UK-EU summit on the 19th. Well, posting on his platform, Truth Social, Donald Trump said the following: big news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. That's 3 p.m. in the afternoon for us here in the UK. The Oval Office concerning a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country. The first of many, triple exclamation mark. We're joined by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, what more detail do we know at this stage?
I am told by a government source that the country that the US have done their first trade deal with is indeed the United Kingdom. There's no official confirmation, Downing Street, on lockdown on this subject, but I am told that yes, it is the UK that will be doing this deal. Now, what I'm expecting at 3 p.m. today is what is known as a heads of terms. In other words, the outline of the deal. But I am told that it is pretty substantive in terms of its scope, making it sound like it could be quite the win for Keir Starmer if he has beaten all of those other countries to the top of the queue to negotiate a deal with Donald Trump. I think the hope of people in number 10 is that this deal will allow them to be able to claim that they have saved jobs that otherwise would have been at threat because of Donald Trump's tariffs that he's imposed on the UK and trading partners all the way around the world. Now, we do not have confirmation of the exact contents of the heads of terms. As I say, all over Whitehall, there is no comment, but I am told by a government source that this deal is with the UK and going ahead. However, we can speculate about what it might involve, because the UK has been particularly keen to try and get some exemptions to lower the quotas for British cars and British steel exports going to the US. They were hit by the 25% levies by Donald Trump earlier this year. And all of those industries have been begging for some kind of relief to be negotiated by government. So I would say that is pretty much at the top of the list of the asks that Keir Starmer's government will have been making, that Lord Mandelson, our ambassador in the US, will have been helping to negotiate, and those teams in the US that you referred to who have been out this week will have been trying to do. So as I say, confirmation from a government source that the country that the US is going to announce a trade deal with is the UK. That's later today. It's not official confirmation, but the source is confident. A substantial agreement, heads of terms. They hope to be able to claim it will save jobs.
The Labour Party, the government, will obviously sell this as a huge win for the United Kingdom. These kind of agreements, these conversations don't just happen overnight. Are they in the right place at the right time? Have they benefited from work that's gone on under previous governments, the Conservatives? Or has this been a really incredibly fast process that has all happened under Labour?
Well, of course, Donald Trump was elected as America's president while Keir Starmer was in office. So I think the Labour Party will be able to claim pretty much all the spoils for this deal. Keir Starmer has put making a close relationship with Donald Trump, made that really one of his top priorities. And this kind of thing will allow him to say that that risk, or it has been a risk on all sorts of fronts, will pay off if, as we expect, the UK is announced as the first trading partner. Now, Donald Trump has always been, since he became president, actually in public, quite warm and welcoming towards Keir Starmer. The appearance that Keir Starmer made at the White House went beyond the wildest dreams of number 10 officials when he went earlier this year. But there have been bumps in the road since then, given the president's approach to tariffs and trade and his approach to Ukraine. So that cozying up to Donald Trump had looked risky, but now it looks as if he will be able to claim that process has paid off just at a point where he needs a win after those disastrous local election results, because Reform UK did so well, eating into Labour as well as Tory votes. A tricky time with the economy as growth projections are cut. Here we have economic good news after a visit not only by Keir Starmer earlier this year, but Rachel Reeves in the last fortnight. They will both, I think, be able to claim some of the spoils. The exact detail, as I say, to be determined, but it'll be the car industry and the steel industry that have the highest hopes. Already some signs that the financial markets are responding this morning and overnight to those suggestions, first reported by the New York Times, but now government source tells me that it is the UK that has this trade deal with the US that Donald Trump is teasing on his social media will come at 3 p.m. today.
And Sam, just finally, we referenced in the introduction there that UK-EU summit on the 19th. How will Keir Starmer, how will the government balance these relationships with the United States, or with also trying to continue to improve those relationships with the EU?
Well, quite bluntly, I think that it is more than convenient. It is politically helpful for Keir Starmer to have got the heads of terms, the kind of main points of a US-UK trade deal nailed down before we see what we have negotiated with the EU, or more importantly, Donald Trump sees what we've negotiated with the EU, because there was always a danger, Gareth, that if we hadn't done that, if it was going to happen the other way round, that Donald Trump might take umbrage in some form at the negotiations that were being done with the EU when they became public on May the 19th, and in some way downgrade or alter or put us further back in the queue. So I think that there will be some relief at the timing, at the way that this has fallen. There were reports that Britain was further down the queue for a UK-US trade deal than some of the other trading nations. There are other countries like Japan, I think, that had thought that they might be further up the queue. So in the context of expectation management, the UK has scored a big win, because it has been able to prove that rather quietly it has leapfrogged some of America's other allies. So we wait to see the details. We don't know it yet. But as I say, one source telling me, a government source, that it is the UK that has signed this deal that Donald Trump is teasing, that we'll hear more about from the president later today.
And Sam, I assume a topic for the podcast today?
Absolutely. Politics at Sam and Anne's, out from about 7:45 this morning. We'll be talking more in detail about this.
Really appreciate it. Sam Coates there for us. Thank you so much. And as well, there'll be plenty more on the live blog on the Politics Hub page, on the app and website. Check it out for yourself. 6:08 here on Sky News Thursday morning. Let's stick with Donald Trump, shall we? Because he's offered to help diffuse escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Pakistan's leaders promised to retaliate to India's deadly strikes on his country, fueling fears that the two nuclear-armed powers are on the brink of war.
I get along with both. I know both very well, and I want to see them work it out. I want to see them stop. And hopefully they can stop now. They've gone tit for tat, so hopefully they can stop now. But I know both. We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
Let's bring in our India reporter, Neville Lazarus, joining us now from Delhi. Two questions for you, Neville, really. Can Donald Trump help? And secondly, we're still waiting on further reaction from Pakistan. What's the latest?
Well, definitely, America can help, especially President Trump with his sort of doesn't confirm to any sort of diplomatic niceties, as one would put it. But he, yes, definitely can help. He has a very good and close relationship with Prime Minister Modi. They've often seen hugging every time they meet. But nevertheless, India out here, they feel they have done what they had to do. They've made these 9 strikes at various terror organizations and camps, which they say they had conducted last night. Obviously, Pakistan has denied all the existence of terror camps in their country. But we've seen overnight there's been very heavy artillery and mortar shelling across the line of control, the sort of de facto border between the two countries, which extends to about 740 kilometers. India says 12 people have been killed, including 3 women and 3 children, and about 51 injured. Also, one of the Indian soldiers has been killed in the Poonch sector. Now, India said that we have completed what we had to do. Now it's in the court of Pakistan, and we will respond to any sort of retaliations from the other side. We've known that 21 airports in India, which is in the north and the northwest of the country, have been closed down. In Pakistan, the Prime Minister Sharif has given a free hand to his military, saying that they can choose the time and place of self-defense and any sort of action they want to take against these attacks.
Neville, joining us from New Delhi, thank you so much. Appreciate the update. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories now. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia has launched guided bombs on the Sumy region, even though a 3-day ceasefire proposed by Vladimir Putin is supposed to be in place. The Russian president planned the ceasefire to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day parade. Ukraine had not agreed to the proposal, dismissing it as theatrics, and it instead suggested a 30-day pause. Iran's foreign minister has denied multiple reports linking his country to an alleged terrorist plot targeting the Israeli embassy here in London. 5 Iranian men were arrested across England on Saturday over what counter-terror police say was an alleged plan to target a single premises. The Times and other media outlets claim that location was the embassy. In a statement, the Iranian foreign minister said Iran, in no uncertain terms, categorically rejects any involvement in such actions and confirms that we have not been informed of any allegations via proper diplomatic channels. Iran has urged the UK to engage so that we may be able to assist any probe into credible allegations. Timing and lack of engagement suggest that something is amiss. There is a history of third parties bent on derailing diplomacy and provoking escalation, resorting to desperate measures, including false flag operations. The Israeli embassy has been approached for its comment. The Bank of England is widely expected to cut interest rates this afternoon. Experts predict the cost of borrowing will fall by 0.25% to 4.25%. The announcement will be delayed by a couple of minutes because of a 2-minute silence at midday for VE Day. British Steel is starting a recruitment drive for the first time since the government stepped in to rescue the firm. 180 roles are being advertised as the company prepares to increase production at its Scunthorpe plant. Last month, the government passed emergency powers that gave them partial control of the furnaces and also of that workforce. To Rome now, where the wait for the new Pope goes on. After black smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel yesterday, it means the 133 cardinals locked inside failed to come to a decision in the first vote of Conclave. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins has more details.
With the closing of the Sistine Chapel, the opening of a new chapter in papal history. Behind these doors, 133 cardinals are voting for the next pope. Earlier, they'd gathered men from different countries, different backgrounds, united in the same role, choosing a leader of the Catholic Church.
We will now enter into conclave to elect the Roman pontiff.
With every step towards conclave, the weight of history hung around them. On the walls, reminders of papal battles to protect the church. In the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's Last Judgment, underlining the gravity of their role. This beautiful chapel, now effectively a beautiful bunker, cutting them off from the outside world as they cast their ballots.
Et ego Petrus cardinalis Parolin.
A process so secretive, they have to swear an oath. And once the final promise was made, with these two words,
extra omnes.
The room was cleared of everyone not voting. As the cardinals considered the future, pilgrims arrived hoping to see history being made. Some overwhelmed by the moment, others overjoyed to be part of it.
And by God's grace, I just felt that I needed to come earlier. And after I booked the tickets, it was announced that the conclave will start today.
And who could be the next pope? At a mass before conclave, men named as favourites worshipped and were offered best wishes. But none would be successful today. After hours of watching and waiting by an expectant crowd, black smoke. First vote, no decision, and it's no surprise, but many here are still hoping that a new pope will be elected before the weekend. This time, the thousands waiting were disappointed. But it's not long until the next vote and a fresh chance of white smoke. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Vatican City.
Well, do stay with us on Sky News Breakfast. More on this live in Rome with Mark Austin from the 8 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the day's weather now, shall we?
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Mostly dry and settled this week. Varying amounts of cloud. Warmer by the weekend, not as hot as last week, though. Mostly fine at the moment. Chilly and quite sunny in the north and west. The morning will stay mostly dry. Sunny spells best over northern and western parts. Cloud building up, though, as the day warms up. A few light and quite isolated showers, mainly in the northeast. Temperatures similar to yesterday. Afternoon bringing little change, though the cloud will tend to dissipate later. Most places sunny into the evening, murky near some North Sea coasts.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning, celebrations across the UK to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War in Europe. We'll speak to a female veteran about her memories of the day. And we'll take a look at what's making the headlines in the papers in the news review with Mari.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology?
The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power.
It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Cartlidge, Sky News.
I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Very diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, he likes to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Now then, today is Victory in Europe Day, marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War on the continent. A bittersweet day for one 101-year-old female veteran who lost 4 family members during the war. Reflecting on her service, Pauline Alexander says current world conflicts are unnecessary. She spoke to Rhiannon Mills.
Who's this in these photos?
That's my brother Guy.
Pauline Alexander is 101. She's never shared her story like this before, but she was there when this moment came.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
As the celebrations erupted in London, Pauline was in Chelmsford. We're watching all of the amazing footage of the celebrations. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I was at home on leave. We joined in the celebrations, singing and dancing. It was very exciting, but it was very, how can I put it, feeling of what next.
Life had completely changed.
Life had completely changed. We started family as 7, and then it was 3.
Like so many, Pauline's war was punctuated by loss. Her father died at work and 3 of her brothers were killed. Peter died in a bike accident delivering a message to the War Office in London. Twins Guy and Bernard, both navigators on RAF bombers, were shot down in 1941 and 1943. Their bodies never came home.
Very traumatic, with all that went on. In those days of war, you just had to accept these things. It was bound to happen at some time or other. Bernard served on Whitley's, and they were known as flying coffins.
Her story about her family and the clerical work she did in the Women's RAF, including at Bomber Commander RAF Waddington, only came to light because of a British Legion appeal. When you went to your mum and said, I want to go and sign up, what did she say to you?
She said yes.
Did she?
It would do me good, getting too spoiled at home.
That sense of service and what we learn from it now feels more important than ever. Why is it so important for you that we take this time to remember what people did?
Because it's all part of history. And history is very important because we learn from history. When you think of all the conflicts that are going on now and how it's all unnecessary in a sense, because what they went through was absolute hell.
You're an amazing generation.
Yes, and there'll never be another one like it.
Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
More coverage on VE Day throughout the course of the day. Let's also bring up to speed on the front pages this morning. Mari's here to do that. We're going to start with the Financial Times. Amid growing tension after India's attacks on Pakistan, the FT leading with the increasing fears the two countries may go to war.
The WWII says that, with both countries having nuclear weapons, calls are growing for them to step back from conflict.
Moving on to the Mail, reporting a group of Iranians arrested over a failed alleged terror plot in London earlier this week had been planning to target the Israeli embassy.
The Telegraph leads with the rising cost of housing migrants coming to the UK, which is now put at £4 million a day.
Moving on to the Times, it says that all migrants will have to become fluent in English under new rules being planned by the Labour government.
And the Express marks the official 80th anniversary of VE Day, with this front page reminding us of the spirit of the time.
Fantastic images. We'll take a look through more of the day's papers at 6:45. Also worth noting the news about the proposed trade deal announced after, or details emerging after the front page is published. But we'll bring you more of that in a few moments' time. I'm Murray for the moment. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show. In sport, Maro Itoje set to be named captain of the British and Irish Lions when the squad tours Australia. It's going to be announced later today.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology?
The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power.
It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Cartlidge, Sky News. I want them to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, he likes to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Very good morning to you. You're watching Breakfast on Sky News. Let's remind you of the top stories this morning. Sky News understands Donald Trump's set to announce America will agree a trade deal with the UK. The US president took to social media to tease a major deal being announced in the Oval Office this afternoon. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump says he wants India and Pakistan to stop attacking each other. Pakistan's leaders promised to retaliate to India's deadly strikes on his country, fueling fears the two nuclear-armed powers are on the brink of war. Iran's foreign minister has denied multiple reports linking Iran to an alleged terrorist plot targeting the Israeli embassy in London. 5 Iranian men were arrested across England on Saturday over what counter-terror police say was an alleged plan to target a single premises. Ukraine says Russia's launched guided bombs on the Sunni region, even though a 3-day ceasefire proposed by Vladimir Putin is supposed to be in place. The Russian president planned the ceasefire to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day parade. Black smoke emerged from the Sistine Chapel in the chimney at the Vatican yesterday, meaning no decisions yet been made on the successor to Pope Francis. 133 cardinals locked inside. They've got no communication with the outside world. And today marks the 80th anniversary of VE Day, when World War II ended in Europe. 101-year-old veteran Pauline Alexander reflected on her service with Sky News and says current conflicts around the world are unnecessary.
History is very important because we learn from history. When you think of all the conflicts that are going on now and how it's all unnecessary in a sense, because what they went through was absolute hell.
Time to bring you more now on the reports that suggest Donald Trump's preparing to announce a trade deal between the UK and the US. So what should we be looking out for? Let's take a look, shall we? First, we'll need to see the breadth and depth of any deal. So far, Donald Trump's favoured quicker, limited agreements rather than fully fledged trade deals that we're more familiar with. But has the UK been able to sidestep the universal 25% tariff that the US has imposed on steel, aluminium and car imports? Meanwhile, a red line for the UK has been the protection of the NHS, and we'll look at whether negotiators have successfully kept the health service off the table. Plus, many headlines will be made of chlorinated chicken and hormone-treated beef as the UK maintained its strong food and animal welfare standards. Well, let's consider that in more detail with Mari, and they have been the sticking points and contentious issues when this has all been previously discussed under the Conservative government, under the Labour government. It will be sold as a win, the headline will be sold as a win for the government, but the devil will be in the detail.
Absolutely, with all trade deals. Look at what happened with the India trade deal. It was talked about as, historic and fantastic, and some people argued, not all, of course, that it was actually perhaps not the best deal we could have or should have done. That's mainly the Conservatives and the Reform Party who were saying that. So you're absolutely right. But also, with all trade deals, to an extent, there are going to be trade-offs, there are going to be compromises. That's the nature of a trade deal, exactly. And if you remember the trade deal that Liz Truss did with Australia and New Zealand at one point, that was very controversial. And when we've spoken on Sky News to farmers, even now they still quote that trade deal as far as they're concerned, a disaster. But for other people, it was a triumph. And so the real interesting thing will be exactly what those trade-offs are. What have we had to give away to get this trade deal with the US? And we're expecting it to be announced at 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. US time. What's also quite interesting is the pound to the dollar rose by 0.4% after these reports came out. So clearly the markets are seeing that and thinking this is good news for the UK's economy if we can start to evade some of those tariffs. The question is, as you were outlining, because we don't know how detailed or deep this trade deal is going to be, are we going to avoid those 25% tariffs on cars, steel, aluminium, but also are we going to avoid those 10% kind of baseline tariffs that everybody in the world has got at the moment that we still have not yet managed to escape? And when Donald Trump was asked about this with Mark Carney when he was meeting the Canadian Prime Minister, and a journalist asked, is there any way this 10% tariff could be lifted and anything Canada could do? And Trump essentially said no. So that will also be a really interesting sticking point as to whether Donald Trump wants to keep that flat baseline tariff for everybody, in which case then are we unable to escape it. But if there actually is some really, really good detail in this deal, this could be seen as a bit of a coup for Keir Starmer, especially if you look at the kind of domestic politics context. At the moment, he's having a bit of a tough time from a lot of his MPs on domestic policy around the winter fuel allowance, around disability benefits, and therefore if he can have this win, perhaps that might give him a bit of a boost, a bit of buoyancy at a time he really needs it.
And also worth noting that the US, the White House, the Trump administration needs wins of its own.
Of course. Yeah.
We saw the Federal Reserve hold interest rates for the third time in a row, calling out dangers in the US economy, talking about inflation, job numbers, talking about the erratic policies that we've seen from Trump. And one could argue, based on kind of import and export data, we were at roughly parity with the US, that the UK was relatively low-hanging fruit. And it was in both sides' interest to get this over the line pretty swiftly. Donald Trump also needs some wins, right?
Absolutely. And it's difficult because right now he is riding a wave of having just won an election, but at some point, if his country's economy doesn't start to improve, if people don't feel like a material difference is made to their lives, then that could all turn very quickly on him. So I think you are right. He does need positive news, a bit of a win, and if once we do get this officially confirmed, it will be also quite symbolic of the fact that actually, if it is us, it's the first trade deal that the US is going to be announcing, and they've chosen it to be with us. And that might say something about the repair job on the special relationship.
And also that state visit that's scheduled sometime in the autumn as well. I'm sure if all of this is wrapped up by then, there will be a lot of fanfares, to say even more fanfares than normal, to say the least. Mari, for a moment, thank you so much. It's 6:35. Let's take a look at the sport.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Plenty more on all our stories on the Sky News website and the Sky News app. In the meantime, here's the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Mostly dry and settled this week, varying cloud amounts, warmer by the weekend, although not as hot as last week. Mostly fine now, chilly in the quite sunny in the north and west actually. The morning, mostly dry, sunny spells best over those northern and western parts. Cloud building as the day warms. A few light and isolated showers, mainly in the northeast. Temperatures similar to yesterday's. The afternoon bringing little change, though the cloud will tend to dissipate later. Most places ending the evening sunny, rather murky though near some of the North Sea coasts. Essentially dry overnight, starry for many, chilly where long clear spells persist.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning, we'll have a look at what's inside the morning's papers in the News Review with Mari next.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Do you fear a 4th indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology?
The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power.
It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Cartlidge, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the Politics Hub. That's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
Mornings mostly dry, sunny spells, northern and western parts having the best of the sunshine. Cloud building up, though, as the day warms up. A few light and isolated showers, mainly up in the northeast. Let's take a look at the temperatures, shall we? They are similar to yesterday's, anywhere between 13 and 18 degrees. The afternoon bringing little change, cloud dissipating later. As for the pollen itself, well, we're more or less between the oak and grass pollen seasons now. Levels low, a little bit of moderate in some southwestern parts.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
That's the pollen sorted. Let's take a look at the papers now, shall we? Mari's here. Lots always to get through, lots of coverage on VE Day. We'll get on to some of that in a few moments' time. Also, details, allegations, suggestions with regards to the Israeli embassy and those 5 Iranians that were arrested.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. It's covered in quite a few of the papers. And essentially, we saw those men arrested, didn't we? And there's a few details that are coming out. So apparently, according to the Daily Mail here, this is the front page splash, this gang of suspected terrorists were planning a deadly attack on the Israeli embassy in London, in Kensington. And they're saying that 4 men were allegedly planning this imminent attack. Dan Jarvis, who is from the Home Office, he described the arrest of the alleged plotters as some of the largest counter-state threats and counter-terrorism actions we have seen in recent times. So clearly quite significant. And if we go into the inside page of this story here, they're saying that actually there's a series of security reviews that have been commissioned by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, in light of these plots that were foiled, and also that it's likely to affect security arrangements at other embassies in the UK as well, in London, obviously, specifically. So quite concerning. And what's really interesting is, so the threat was considered so serious that armed special forces teams were drafted in to help counter-terrorism officers raid properties in Rochdale, Swindon, London, Manchester and Stockport. And the plan was seen to be at its kind of final planning stages. It's really, really concerning.
And that was the thing that really stood out to me is, you know, we're used to seeing the Metropolitan Police taking the lead on counter-terrorism, often in collaboration with local regional forces. But the visuals of seeing people in military fatigues, armed, walking down the side of that building in particular, and that is the footage of an individual kind of semi-clothed being kind of led away. armed, fatigued individuals behind. It's imagery we don't see in the UK. And it was one of those moments you kind of took a pause, went, heavens, this is indicative of certainly the level of severity with which they're approaching this. Iran, for its part, goes, absolutely nothing to see here. We have denial all the allegations. Like we say, there's lots of allegations swirling around. Sky News kind of work through some of these details, but lots of the papers kind of covering it in their front pages. And you know, the Home Office will be, I should imagine, pleased with the degree to which they were on the front foot with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, you know, people are doing, obviously, clearly a very, very good job at protecting the public, the embassies, and you know, the UK.
Yeah, absolutely remarkable. Let's move on, shall we? I just want to share this front page of the Daily Express. There's a fantastic image on it of these, well, 8th of May, 1945. Two pictures you can see here on the side there, those Union Jacks in full colour. And this is Maureen Jenkins on the left. She's quoted in the paper, and that quote on the top, "Homes were ruined, people had died, but there was a sense of hope in our small community. People knew there were better days ahead." She's there with that Union Jack slightly forlornly at her feet. Unfortunately, her friend pictured to the side, Jeannie Levy, died a couple of months later of meningitis at the age of 2, but again can be seen there kind of wryly smiling towards the camera. And there's lots of coverage in the papers, and in fairness, in the inner pages 10 and 11 of the Express, Maureen is quoted in that. But it's a moment to consider what's gone before. And let's be honest, history has a habit of repeating itself. And I think we must take this moment, considering that lots of these voices and the next kind of big anniversary of 90 years, we won't hear from them firsthand. No. And it is good that the papers take these stories and run with them. Sky News does, and equally, social media, often decried, but there's so much content about this. And that is a glimmer of hope that young people who are scrolling through every app that they've got do maybe just get exposed to a little bit that they hadn't seen before.
Yeah, and I think it's just so important to remember what people lived through, what people had to endure, and what it was all for. I think, you know, they always say that actually it's quite beneficial to have old people and young people together, and obviously young people can learn from the elderly, but also just hearing the stories, hearing what life was like, just trying to imagine being their age, being this age during the war. I mean, my grandparents were evacuees during the war, and, you know, they were sent off to, you know, the countryside, like everybody was, to be protected. And, you know, it touched everyone's lives so profoundly, and it's so easy to forget, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. Your grandparents got to the countryside. My grandmother got as far Bermondsey to Reading.
Oh.
The train didn't take her very far. But my grandfather, it all worked out, so, you know, grateful for it. But it's you know, those stories that otherwise, you know, went unheard. And my grandfather talking about him working on the bouncing bomb release mechanism, and kind of, you know, my grandfather on my mother's side, prisoner of war, and, you know, being held by the Germans. The opportunity we had to kind of hear those stories firsthand, soon gone. And it's lovely to know that over the last 4 days we've been able to kind of bring so much, plenty more as well, kind of online, and there's going to be plenty more throughout the course of the day. That 2-minute silence at midday today, delaying the announcement of interest rates by 2 minutes. There was a press release had to go out about that, but for all the right reasons. Yeah. Let's move on, shall we, to the Times front page, referencing again that alleged Iranian terror plot, but then at the latter part of the front page, this story.
Yes, this is an interesting story. So the Times is reporting that there's going to be this new immigration white paper, and as part of it, people who are coming here to live, to work, are going to need to have a better kind of minimum standard of English than is currently required. And so the current standard is considered to be almost a kind of the same level as if you were doing GCSE English as a foreign language. So, you know, when we all did French or German or Spanish or whatever as a foreign language for GCSE, it's the same, but imagine if that was for English, essentially. And what is supposed to be in this white paper is that's going to be increased to not quite, but almost the kind of equivalent of A-level as a foreign language instead. So at the moment, in the current system, people need to understand the main subjects regularly encountered in work, school or leisure, deal with situations likely to arise while travelling, produce simple, connected text on topics which are familiar or personal, of personal interest. And according to the Home Office, the new guidelines and the new standard is going to be higher, and therefore it's going to be needing people to express themselves fluently and spontaneously without much obvious searching for expressions, to speak English flexibly and effectively for social, academic and professional purposes. And this is really all about integration. This is about making sure that people have a good enough standard of English where they can communicate with people, make friends, integrate in their local communities, and that not be a barrier or, to an extent, a vehicle toward isolation. If you haven't got the level of English, it can be incredibly isolating to not have the language. It's difficult because we're in a situation now where we often get your kind of more political right-wing figures talking about integration. Camille Badenoch likes to talk about integration a lot, saying that we haven't got enough integration for migrants. And clearly Labour is starting to talk about this now, wanting to talk about this now, perhaps because of the threat of reform that we know they're saying is existential, and they're trying to make sure that they are showing they're cracking down on immigration. But interestingly, the Times is saying that this is partly because they want to reduce net migration. I think some people would argue, is this going to reduce net migration, or is it just going to make people improve their English, which would obviously be a positive? So I think the jury's out on what it would actually do in terms of the numbers, but the government is clearly briefing that this would reduce the numbers.
And also, as the paper notes, also hoping that it will get more than its remarkable figure, 9 million economically inactive people into work, and that some of them might be economically inactive because they struggle to fulfil the language tasks required to be in employment. I was speaking to somebody the other day who works in higher education and was talking about the fact that sometimes in tutorials they have to have people bringing a friend in to translate for them because they've come as, foreign students and candidates to come and study, but actually the language proficiency isn't high enough to be able to really fulfil the necessary requirements to be able to study in the first place. And I'm sure many people will go, well, look, this was kind of a makes sense headline. The Daily Mirror goes on page 10 with the strap, "Holy smoke."
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant headline there.
Disappointment as first cardinals vote to fail to elect new pope. And I kind of looked at this image on page 11 of the Mirror, which I'm sure we can show you. It struck me that most of us have to kind of work from an office with suspended ceilings and a bit of, kind of that kind of generic carpet that comes in workplaces. Conclave, however, it goes without saying it's Vatican City, of course. It goes without saying it's the frescoes of Michelangelo. It goes without saying it's every piece of gold leaf that you can ever put your fingers on, although you shouldn't. Just what a setup. Just what... The imagery, and I appreciate that's a large part of all of this, but the imagery, just remarkable. And the fact that you've kind of got this disparity between the old and the new, so the old with all of the iconography of the Catholic Church, and then the new of it all being swept for bugs before they all sat down and took their seats. And then the old of the smoke, and back in the day they used to use wet straw and dry straw to try and produce different colours of smoke, but sometimes it wasn't actually clear to start with. So on more than one occasion, white smoke appeared from the chimney, and then it turned black. Because no. Whereas now they add special dyes into the furnaces to make sure that it's definitely black or definitely white. The fact that we saw people rappel down this roof about 3 days ago to install the chimney in the first place, because it's not normally there, and it's all quiet on the front in Vatican City there. But we will go live to Vatican City and to Rome later this programme. And there we are, St. Peter's Square in Vatican City.
It's so striking, isn't it?
Murky morning, but the atmospherics there are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's a bit of a gloomy sky there, but it looks like a postcard, doesn't it? It is just incredible. I mean, I've been to the Vatican years ago, and it was just so striking. But on the picture in the Mirror, I have to say, this is going to sound incredibly basic, but it makes me feel, to be fair, it reminds me of the Great Hall in Hogwarts, in the Harry Potter films. They have the huge tables.
And the floating candles.
And exactly. To me, it's just so majestic. It's so magical. It feels like almost like a scene out of Hogwarts.
I've dined in that hall once for an event in the Harry Potter's Hogwarts Hall. I'm sure it's got an actual name, whichever college it is in Oxford. Yeah. And it is a remarkable space. And the other thing that gets me, you've got these 133 cardinals. There was supposed to be 135. 2 pulled out because of ill health. They're from every corner of the planet. Lots of them have never met. And they are going to elect somebody who leads a church of 1.4 billion people. Well, the only other 2 people that have a congregation of 1.4 billion, roughly, are the heads of China and India. And so you've got this group of people, some of whom might know each other by name or maybe not by sight, who are coming together to elect a very powerful individual. Politically, spiritually, in terms of humanity and human rights and all of those aspects. I would, we will never know, of course, but you kind of do wonder not the conversations, but what's the atmosphere like? Do they feel the weight of expectation, or are there the odd kind of jokes and moments of levity?
To be a fly on the wall.
Oh, if Hollywood would be desperate to be a fly. I mean, they've given it a good try. The number of times someone's looked at me the last few days and gone, have you seen Conclave?
Have you seen Conclave?
I have not.
Me neither.
I
will.
I had 2 flights I was supposed to have seen on, and I fell asleep on both.
Oh.
But we will be live in Rome with Mark Austin and the team coming up in about an hour or so's time. I'm going to bring you all of the details and reaction from Vatican City. Police there estimate 250,000 people will fill St. Peter's Square to watch the moment that the smoke does eventually turn white. We will bring you that moment here on Sky News. Stick with us for the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. On today's programme, a UK-US trade agreement appears to be finally over the line.
Donald Trump teases a major announcement later today. We'll see what a deal could look like.
Many more details to come on Thursday, the 8th of May. Sky News understands the UK and US have reached a trade agreement with an announcement expected from President Trump at 3 p.m. UK time today. Pakistan's Prime Minister says India will pay the price after its deadly missile strikes as Trump offers to help defuse the situation. We'll be live in Rome, where cardinals will undertake another vote this morning to decide who will be the next pope. Plus,
life had completely changed. We started family as 7, and then it was 3.
bittersweet reflections on today's Victory in Europe Day as we hear from one survivor 8 decades since the war ended. And Arsenal's hopes of winning their first ever Champions League are over after they were beaten by Paris Saint-Germain in the semi-finals. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast. Gareth Barlow with you. President Trump poised to announce a new trade agreement today, which Sky News understands to be with the UK. The detail of any such agreement remains unclear, but pressure's been mounting on the White House to secure trade agreements amid its global tariff war. British trade negotiators have been in Washington this week. That's as the UK also pushed for a deal ahead of a UK-EU summit on the 19th. Well, posting on his platform, Truth Social, Donald Trump said this: big news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. That's 3 in the afternoon for us. The Oval Office concerning a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country. The first of many, triple exclamation mark, he writes. Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has more details.
I am told by a government source that the country that the US have done their first trade deal with is indeed the United Kingdom. There's no official confirmation, Downing Street, on lockdown on this subject, but I am told that yes, it is the UK that will be doing this deal. Now, what I'm expecting at 3 p.m. today is what is known as a heads of terms. In other words, the outline of the deal. But I am told that it is pretty substantive in terms of its scope, making it sound like it could be quite the win for Keir Starmer if he has beaten all of those other countries to the top of the queue to negotiate a deal with Donald Trump. I think the hope of people in number 10 is that this deal will allow them to be able to claim that they have saved jobs that otherwise would have been at threat because of Donald Trump's tariffs that he's imposed on the UK and trading partners all the way around the world. Now, we do not have confirmation of the exact contents of the heads of terms. As I say, all over Whitehall, there is no comment, but I am told by a government source that this deal is with the UK and going ahead. However, we can speculate about what it might involve because the UK has been particularly keen to try and get some exemptions to lower the quotas for British cars and British steel exports going to the US. They were hit by the 25% levies by Donald Trump earlier this year. And all of those industries have been begging for some kind of relief to be negotiated by government. So I would say that is pretty much at the top of the list of the asks that Keir Starmer's government will have been making, that Lord Mandelson, our ambassador in the US, will have been helping to negotiate, and those teams in the US that you referred to who have been out this week will have been trying to do. So as I say, confirmation from a government source that the country that the US is going to announce a trade deal with is the UK. That's later today. It's not official confirmation, but the source is confident. A substantial agreement, heads of terms. They hope to be able to claim it will save jobs.
Sam Coates there. So what should we be looking out for in a possible deal? First, we need to see the breadth and depth of any deal. So far, Donald Trump's favoured quicker, limited agreements rather than fully fledged trade deals we're more familiar with. So then, has the UK been able to sidestep the universal 25% tariff that the US imposed on steel, aluminium and car imports? Meanwhile, a red line for the UK has been protection of the NHS. We'll look at whether negotiators have successfully kept the health service off the table. Plus, many headlines made over chlorinated chicken and hormone-treated beef as the UK maintained a strong food and animal welfare standard regime. Well, Mari's here in the studio with us. The government will sell it as a win, obviously. There will obviously be wins for both sides. There will also be compromises, and that's really where people will be looking, won't they? What compromises has the UK and the US had to give to each other? The reality is you've got a nation with about a $19 trillion economy and one at about $2 trillion. So you would think that the way to power would be in the US's camp, but also Donald Trump does need stuff from the UK too.
Yeah, it's a really difficult balance to strike, isn't it, for the government, because they are wanting a US trade deal. Think about how many years we've been talking about a US trade deal and it was never delivered. It was considered that the Biden administration didn't really have the appetite for it when he was still the president. And so I think, first of all, it would be symbolic, the fact that out of every nation in the world, post-Liberation Day, as Donald Trump liked to call it when he put tariffs on all the countries in the world. If the first one is the UK, I do think that represents something. I think, first of all, it represents a concerted effort from the UK side to really, really push that trade deal, to really, really amend that kind of, let's say, broken or perhaps slightly weakened special relationship and show that the UK and the US are still incredibly close partners and friends economically, as well as obviously in other aspects. But also, I think it's interesting in terms of what this might mean for the UK economy. So when the report started to emerge, the pound went up against the dollar by 0.4%. And that indicates that people find this an encouraging sign for the UK's economy if there is going to be a beneficial trade deal with the US. Also domestically, Keir Starmer is currently in a bit of a tight spot when it comes to some of his own policies, and the fact that lots of Labour MPs are frustrated with the policies on winter fuel, on disability benefits, and therefore this might just kind of give him that edge to say, you might not be happy with some of the things over here, but look at what I'm doing over here. And this is going to have a material impact on GDP, on people's living standards in the years ahead. That's what I'd expect them to sell it as. And also, we're hearing from the Prime Minister in a couple of hours anyway. He's giving a keynote speech at the London Defence Conference, and it'll be interesting to see what he says and if he's asked about this. And even before that, you'll be speaking to the government for John Healey in the next, 15 minutes? And it'll be interesting to see if he gives us any flavour or hints as to what we might expect.
Talk about hints a little bit on the live blog on the Sky News website and app, quoting our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, saying from his sources, the deal was almost done in time for the IMF summit between the 21st and 26th of April, although his sources say it actually required presidential sign-off, which is the cause for the bit of the delay, and making the point that the White House will say tariffs worked and achieved a trade deal. Starmer will go soft diplomacy and keeping cool heads, cool, calm heads, as he said repeatedly. Yeah. Both sides will also try and take the political wins, won't they, for their own kind of respective purposes. Yeah. The big wait and see is what it does for the economy, because ours has languished for years and years now.
Yeah, exactly. And when we had the India trade deal announced earlier in the week, they said it was going to add a small part, it was about 0.1% to GDP by 2040. But nonetheless, if you have more and more and more trade deals that add just small amounts to our projected GDP, that does obviously add up in the end. And as we were saying, though, it's always about those trade-offs. And clearly, with the India trade deal, we had the Reform Party and Conservatives saying that when Labour negotiates, Britain loses, saying that they never would have signed a deal like that. And then some of the Indian officials coming out and said, actually, you were considering something quite similar, and trying to accuse the Conservatives of hypocrisy. So you're always going to get the politics as well, and the kind of weaponizing of those trade-offs. But nonetheless, we'll see what's in the deal. But this could be a bit of a coup for Keir Starmer.
Murray, for the moment, thank you so much. Worth just noting that Ed Conway and Sam Coates both with us later in the programme. Do stick with us on Breakfast, more details on that trade agreement. Meanwhile, President Trump has also offered to help defuse escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Pakistan's leaders promised to retaliate to India's deadly strikes on his country fueling fears the two nuclear-armed powers are on the brink of war.
I get along with both. I know both very well, and I want to see them work it out. I want to see them stop. And hopefully they can stop now. They've gone tit for tat, so hopefully they can stop now. But I know both. We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
Let's bring in our India reporter Neville Lazarus, who joins us from Delhi. So the US trying to pledge help and support Donald Trump. We just heard from him there, but we're also waiting for the response which Islamabad has promised following those strikes from India.
Well, America can make a big difference. President Trump has an unconventional way of dealing on international issues. He's also got a very good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. We've always seen them whenever they've met, they've hugged. He calls him his very good friend. But the tensions between the two countries, these are two nuclear-armed neighbors who have hostilities of decades, has really hit the roof in one sense. We've seen attacks yesterday on various sites in Pakistan, occupied Kashmir, and across the border, international border into Pakistan as well. And there have been many deaths in Pakistan. Since then, there's been heavy shelling and artillery shelling and mortar shelling across the line of control, which is about a 740-kilometer border between India and Pakistan in the Kashmir region. India says 13 people have been killed, including a soldier, and several people are injured. There are many houses being damaged. We are hearing reports of the same on the other side. India says it has completed whatever it had to do in terms of hitting terror organizations, their camps. Pakistan has denied that these terror camps exist in their country. Now India says it's in the hands of Pakistan. The retaliation from Pakistan will depend on how India will respond to that. On the other side, Pakistan has said that these strikes were unjustified, was hit on their sovereign nation. Some of them hit across the international border. And that's been the big difference. Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif called an emergency meeting yesterday and spoke about avenging every drop of blood that was spilled yesterday. He has categorically said that he gives the Pakistani military a free hand to conduct actions of self-defense of their time and place of choosing. So at the moment, the ball in the court of Pakistan. The next 24, 48 hours is crucial to see what actions Pakistan does, and then India will respond to that. Though on India's side, they have strengthened the military armory and personnel on the borders, but are waiting and watching for a response from Pakistan.
Live in New Delhi, Neville, thank you so much. Time to bring you up to speed on some of the day's other headlines now. Iran's foreign minister has denied multiple reports linking his country to an alleged terrorist plot targeting the Israeli embassy in London. 5 Iranian men were arrested across England on Saturday over what counter-terror police say was an alleged plan to target a single premises. The Times and other media outlets claim the location was the embassy. Well, in a statement, the Iranian foreign minister said Iran, in no uncertain terms, categorically rejects any involvement in such actions and confirms that we have not been informed of any allegations via proper diplomatic channels. Iran has urged the UK to engage so we may assist in any probe into credible allegations. Timing and lack of engagement suggests that something is amiss, the embassy says. There is a history of third parties bent on derailing diplomacy and provoking escalation, resorting to desperate measures, including false flag operations. The Israeli embassy, meanwhile, has also been approached for comment. The Bank of England is widely expected to cut interest rates this afternoon. Experts predict a cost of borrowing will fall by 0.25% to 4.25%. The announcement delayed by a couple of minutes because of a 2-minute silence at midday for VE Day. British Steel is starting a recruitment drive for the first time since the government stepped in to rescue the firm. 180 roles are being advertised. That's as the company prepares to increase production at its Scunthorpe plant. Last month, the government passed emergency powers that gave them partial control of the furnaces and the workforce. Arsenal's hopes of winning their first ever Champions League are over after they were beaten by Paris Saint-Germain in the semi-finals. Arsenal trailed 1-0 from the first leg, and goals from Fabian Ruiz and Hakimi gave PSG a 3-goal cushion on aggregate. Bukayo Saka gave Arsenal a glimmer of hope with a goal soon afterwards, but it wasn't to be for Mikel Arteta's side, who will end the season trophyless. Today is Victory in Europe Day, marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War on the continent. It's a bittersweet day for one 101-year-old female veteran who lost 4 family members during the war. But reflecting on her service, Pauline Alexander says current world conflicts are unnecessary. She was speaking to Rhiannon Mills.
Who's this in these photos?
That's my brother Guy.
Pauline Alexander is 101. She's never shared her story like this before, but she was there when this moment came.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
As the celebrations erupted in London, Pauline was in Chelmsford. We're watching all of the amazing footage of the celebrations. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I was at home on leave. We joined in the celebrations, we were singing and dancing. It was very exciting, but it was very, how can I put it, feeling of what next.
Life had completely changed.
Life had completely changed. We started family as 7, and then it was 3.
Like so many, Pauline's war was punctuated by loss. Her father died at work and 3 of her brothers were killed. Peter died in a bike accident delivering a message to the War Office in London. Twins Guy and Bernard, both navigators on RAF bombers, were shot down in 1941 and 1943. Their bodies never came home.
Very traumatic.
Yeah.
With all that went on. In those days of war, you just had to accept these things. It was bound to happen at some time or other. Bernard served on Whitley's, and they were known as flying coffins.
Her story about her family and the clerical work she did in the Women's RAF, including at Bomber Commander RAF Waddington, only came to light because of a British Legion appeal. When you went to your mum and said, I want to go and sign up, what did she say to you?
She said yes.
Did she?
It would do me good. Getting too spoiled at home.
That sense of service and what we learn from it now feels more important than ever. Why is it so important for you that we take this time to remember what people did?
Because it's all part of history. And history is very important because we learn from history. When you think of all the conflicts that are going on now, and how it's all unnecessary in a sense, because what they went through was absolute hell.
You're an amazing generation.
Yes, there'll never be another one like it.
Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, let's bring you some live images of preparations that are underway today for marking VA Day, the 80th anniversary, of course. These are some of the live scenes over London. You can see there, latest there from Horse Guards Parade, the seats, the staging, the Union flag all set out. Those flags fluttering in the morning sunlight. There will be a 2-minute silence at midday. This, of course, that 4th of 4 days worth of celebrations and commemorations that began on the bank holiday Monday. They've seen celebrations and also memories shared across the United Kingdom. There's been so many, again, in the day's papers. Again, here on Sky News, actually, in about half an hour's time, we'll be hearing from somebody who was moved during the Blitz, and plenty more to bring you over the coming hours. But let's also bring you the Defence Secretary, John Healey, who joins us now on Sky News. Good to have you with us. This is a very poignant moment and a very poignant day.
It's a very special day, isn't it? It's the day that we mark the courage and the sacrifice of what was undoubtedly Britain's greatest generation, and we can never repay the debt that we owe them, but we can honour their memory by remembering what they went through and the important lessons that we can learn from today. And I've got Westminster Abbey behind me. There'll be a Thanksgiving service led by the King and the Prime Minister, a minute's silence, a big concert just round the corner on Horse Guards Parade tonight for 15,000 people. Extraordinary events for an extraordinary generation, and a huge thank you to everybody that's made the street parties, the national parades, as well as the special services possible for us all to participate in during the course of today.
And you've been writing in the papers today about the contrast of the situation we're in now and the peace that was announced 80 years ago, that there is still full-scale war on the European continent in 2025. How confident are you that peace can be brought back to Ukraine, but also Europe as a whole? And what efforts are being brought about to achieve that at the moment?
Well, you're right. This day, 80 years on from the end of the war in Europe, it's a moment to remember, but it's also a call to action to look to restore that peace that they gave so much to secure 80 years ago. Britain's stepping up in this moment. We're increasing defence spending alongside European allies to strengthen European security. And of course, we're leading support for Ukraine, not just in continuing the fight against Putin's invasion, but also in preparing to secure a long-term peace if we can get a ceasefire with Putin. And the other lesson I think that we can take from that great generation and their sacrifices is that we get our strength through alliances. And of course, Britain founded NATO straight after the Second World War. Our commitment to that is unshakable, and it's 32 nations strong now, and it's part of what will help keep the peace in the future as well.
Just whilst we have you as well, obviously there's a renewed flashpoint with regards to India and Pakistan. The Prime Minister talked about the fact that the UK has a special relationship with both countries, a unique one with both countries. What are you doing personally to try and ensure that there is de-escalation along the line of control and in Kashmir? Have you spoken to your counterparts in both nations? And what is the UK doing to try and bring down those tensions?
First of all, like many others, we're condemning the terrorist attacks that India suffered, but urging on both sides, and as you say, Britain has a especially close relationship both with Pakistan and with India, military, diplomatic and political, and we're using all those channels to say to both sides, look, further escalation's in no one's interest. We've got to bring back a degree of regional stability, and we're urging a restraint now in reaction and counter-reaction. And I hope that the recent tit-for-tat strikes will be the last, and that we can get negotiations and talks going so that we can settle the undoubted tensions in that part of the world.
The number 10 spokesman says that the Prime Minister is going to update people later today on discussions with the United States, a reported trade agreement, Donald Trump touting a big announcement in all caps on Truth Social. Have we achieved a trade deal with the United States?
Well, I'm not going to preempt. I think you wouldn't expect me to preempt what the Prime Minister or the President may say, but what this reminds us about is just how indispensable the US is as an ally to the UK on economic security and on national security. And we've been conducting hard negotiations with the US ever since Keir Starmer went to the White House in February, trying to secure a good economic deal for Britain. And during that time, I have to say, ministers like me have stepped back and refrained from commenting on those discussions in order to give the negotiators the space to secure the best possible deal for Britain. So any live discussions or timelines really aren't for me this morning.
There will be people, though, people who are concerned about the NHS, people who work in the NHS. There will be farmers who are concerned about food standards. There will be shoppers concerned about food standards and potential slipping of any of those elements in a potential agreement with the US. You say you've stepped back from commentary, but can you assure voters, can you assure the British public that the NHS, as we know and love, has been protected, that the food standards that we can enjoy have been protected? Are you confident that the UK will have got a good deal for the United Kingdom?
I'm confident our negotiators will secure a good deal with the US. They're an indispensable ally for our economic security, but I'm Defence Secretary, and they're also an indispensable defence ally for us. And we do things as two nations together that no other nations do. We stand shoulder to shoulder. We fought in the Second World War together. We celebrated the victory in Europe together 80 years ago today. And just in the last few weeks, we've stood together alongside to maintain freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. And of course, the US and the UK are at the centre of our European security through our commitments to NATO.
So the NHS safe and secure, food standards safe and secure, the special relationship safe and secure. This, you're saying, will be a good day for the United Kingdom?
Space for our negotiators to get the best possible deal for Britain, as they will, not for ministers like me to provide commentary as those discussions go on.
And so you're not going to pass comment then, I assume, on the tariffs potentially for aluminium or steel or cars or the UK film industry, all of those elements that have been crucial in these negotiations. What message do you have for communities in Port Talbot or Scunthorpe or those in the north of London who are producing blockbuster films? Where do they stand in this negotiation process, and will they have a better deal in a few hours' time than they currently do at the moment?
I'm not going to comment on potential content of any economic deal or timelines. What I will say is that for steelworkers like those in Scunthorpe, they've seen now a UK government, a Labour government, willing to step in to secure the future of their industry. And as Defence Secretary, I'm going to make sure that the increased defence spending that we will use to secure our defences for the future also brings a premium, a dividend, if you like, and is measured in more British jobs, more British apprentices, more successful British firms right across the country. And you'll hear the Prime Minister also talking about that this morning.
Just finally, the number 10 spokesperson saying the PM will update people later today. Hearing from the White House, they will make an announcement at 3 p.m. UK time. Is that when we should expect something from Downing Street?
Look, I don't account for the movements in Downing Street. I'm concerned that this is the 80th anniversary of VE Day. It's the moment with an extraordinary set of events to mark an extraordinary generation when we can celebrate the sacrifices that they made for all our freedoms, but also recognise that we've got war in Europe again on this continent, and we must do more to try and secure the long-term peace in Ukraine and make sure that Putin never again threatens not just Ukraine, but other parts of Europe as well.
Sentiments I'm sure many will echo today. John Healey, Defence Secretary, joining us live here on Sky News. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just coming up to 7:30. Let's take a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It'll stay mostly dry and settled this week, varying cloud amounts. It'll turn warmer by the weekend, although not as hot as last week. Mostly fine now, chilly in the quite sunny north and west. The morning will stay mostly dry with sunny spells, best over northern and western parts, although cloud will build up as the day warms up. There'll be just a few light and quite isolated showers, mainly in the northeast. Temperatures similar to yesterday's.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning on Victory in Europe Day, we'll be speaking to a man with very personal connections to some soldiers who served in the Second World War.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
You're watching Sky News. Gareth Barlow with you. Let's remind you of our top stories this morning. Sky News understands Donald Trump is set to announce America will agree a trade deal with the UK. The US president took to social media to tease a major deal being announced in the Oval Office this afternoon. Donald Trump, meanwhile, says he wants India and Pakistan to stop attacking each other. Pakistan's leader has promised to retaliate to India's deadly strikes on his country, fueling fears the two nuclear-armed powers are on the brink of war. Iran's foreign minister has denied multiple reports linking Iran to an alleged terrorist plot targeting the Israeli embassy in London. 5 Iranian men were arrested across England on Saturday over what counter-terror police say was an alleged plan to target a single premises. A 3-day ceasefire proposed by Vladimir Putin has come into place today. The Russian president planned the ceasefire to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day parade, where he will be welcoming more than 24 world leaders at the event. Ukraine hasn't agreed to the proposal, dismissing it as theatrics, and it has suggested instead a 30-day pause. Black smoke emerged from the Sistine Chapel chimney last night, meaning no decisions yet be made on the successor to Pope Francis. 133 cardinals are locked inside with no communication with the outside world. An interim report into a fire causing widespread disruption at Heathrow Airport in March says the root of the cause of the outage, Sadia, remains unknown.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot to unpick here. You'll remember March 21st as the day when we all discovered that the entire functioning of the UK's largest airport, all 5 terminals of Heathrow, relied primarily on power supplied by one electrical substation, so that when there was a fire at that electrical substation, that airport had to close. The runway was shut, the doors were closed, flights were either grounded or rerouted. But it wasn't just Heathrow Airport, of course. Nearly 70,000 other customers were also impacted, including many domestic households. So in the aftermath of that fire, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, had asked the National Energy System Operator, which is the body that controls the balancing and directing of power during such an incident, to look into what happened and to publish its findings, giving them a 6-week deadline for the interim report, which is then due to come out later this summer. We're just looking at it now. It's just been published in the last hour. And actually, there are a lot of questions still remaining. So they say that the root cause of the fire remains unknown. What they do tell us is a step-by-step of what happened. So one of the 3 supergrid transformers had tripped. That is later confirmed to have been caught on fire. Then shortly after that, another transformer had tripped, and this all resulted in that power loss. They say that the London Fire Brigade and National Grid Electricity Transmission are continuing to conduct forensic investigations. I should mention here that the Metropolitan Police did say shortly after that fire that it had found no evidence to suggest that the incident was suspicious in nature. But I'm afraid a lot of questions remain. If you look at the report's sort of list of ongoing lines of inquiry, the root cause of the fire still unknown, still yet to examine the design standards of substation sites, North Hyde, which is the substation, their maintenance history. They still need to look at the risk management mitigation. So this is an initial assessment of the evidence that they have gathered so far, and they aim to deliver their final report by the end of next month.
Sadia, thank you. We'll follow those details closely. Speaking up to speed on some of the day's other stories now, as Pakistan vows to retaliate to India's strikes on the country. The two sides are now on the brink of war. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi examines the conflict, which dates back more than 7 decades.
The Kashmir conflict has shaped South Asian geopolitics for more than 7 decades. The struggle between India and Pakistan over the territory has led to multiple wars, and the area is now one of the most militarised in the world. India and Pakistan are once again on the brink of all-out war, but to understand the present tensions, you need to go back in time. Let's rewind to 1947. This is what the map looked like when Britain partitioned its former colony. Pakistan, with a Muslim majority, was created in the west, and India to the east with a mostly Hindu population. War quickly followed in October. The Hindu ruler of the Muslim majority Jammu and Kashmir originally sought to remain independent, but when Pakistani militants invaded Kashmir, he appealed for Indian military help. The ensuing war lasted until an armistice was implemented on the 1st of January 1949, splitting Kashmir into 2 parts. Tensions continued, though, with the Second Indo-Pakistan War in 1965, again over a border dispute, and the last conflict in 1999. But by this point, both countries had gained atomic weapons, raising fears of a nuclear confrontation. Since then, both sides have continued to face off over Kashmir, with accusations of Pakistani support for terrorists, something Islamabad denies. The Mumbai attack was by far the most devastating, known inside India as its 9/11. In 2008, 166 people were killed over 4 days when 10 heavily armed gunmen arrived by sea from Pakistan, unleashing a coordinated wave of terror. The latest confrontation began 2 weeks ago after another barbaric terror attack, this time in India-administered Kashmir. A popular tourist destination was targeted, 26 people killed. One assailant reportedly told a survivor, "Go tell this to Prime Minister Modi." The calculated targeting of tourists appeared designed to provoke a strong Indian response. The attack was blamed on a group calling itself the Resistance Front, and it has links to Lashkar-e-Taiba, the same organisation behind the Mumbai attacks. India has long claimed LET is used as a proxy, something Pakistan denies. It says New Delhi has failed to show any evidence of complicity. India says its response has been measured and is not escalatory. but by striking compounds in the Pakistani heartland of Punjab, it's not being seen that way by Islamabad. Pakistan is calling the airstrikes an act of war. The main worry for the world and the region are the nuclear missiles aimed at each other. Pakistan has around 170 and India has 164. But even if the tensions are dialed down, as we've seen throughout the history, the underlying causes of the Kashmir dispute, steeped in unresolved colonial legacy, will remain and could break out at any time.
80 years ago today, the Allies accepted Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender, ending the Second World War in Europe. Those who served are being remembered today through events held across the country celebrating VE Day. Well, I'm pleased to say Flight Officer Aaron Marshall joins us now. Both of his grandfathers served in the war and grandmother in the Red Cross as well.
That's right, Gareth, yes. My grandfather was desperate to join up, and as soon as he was 18, he signed on the dotted line and went down to Brighton Pier to sort of celebrate, where he bumped into my grandmother, and they started a courtship as she went off to serve in the Red Cross. And he went off to Palestine to serve for the duration of the war, and on return ended up at the Isle of Wight Albany barracks there to do some more training, and after VE Day he got sent home, where they met and got married and settled down together to live their life.
So a chance encounter on Brighton Pier, kind of to celebrate the fact that he could go to war, is how that all came about?
Absolutely, yes. My grandmother wasn't allowed to serve abroad. Her mother was against her going away with the Red Cross, so she said, "Oh, I'll pop down to Brighton Pier to meet some friends and cousins." And lo and behold, my grandfather must have won her charm there, so that was that.
And talk to me about what your grandmother did with the Red Cross then.
So she did nursing primarily. She wanted to serve in the Hertfordshire area. I'm sure she came into London, Watford area to serve as well. And that was essentially what she wanted to do, and to do her part, basically.
And testament to the fact that there were so many roles. You know, we often focus on the military fatigues, but there's so many people pulled together as a nation to ensure the day that we're celebrating today. Meanwhile, you then say your grandfather did go abroad to go and serve.
He did, yes. He served in Palestine, and he's fought his war over there. When he came home, much like many of the generation, he couldn't or wouldn't talk about the things that he did there, but he was always very encouraging to myself, and his way of giving to me was to encourage me to read books or stories about the sort of things that happened over there, and that's how he influenced me to then ultimately serve as well.
And worth noting, your grandfather on the other side, desperate to serve, but like so many, was then kind of told that kind of physical situation didn't allow to kind of go abroad, but still, again, played a role in the UK.
That's right. He laid railways for a living, so his back was completely kaput by the time he got to that point. So he really wanted to serve, but they said he could be working supply, so he was a driver and resupplying in the UK, desperate to go away, but was never able to. So
you're obviously sat here with your medals on. How does what your grandparents did impact what you do today?
I think it took a while for me to realise that they were the driving force behind me eventually serving, and I think it's that point, that inspiration that others have served and what they've done for us, that I can do my small bit for the country today. So really that inspiration came from them, and that my gratitude for them, and that I'm able to now serve and do my small part, although you could argue their sacrifice was much more. But if I can do my small amount today, I certainly will.
And just talk to us about the two medals. What can we see?
That's coronation and Jubilee medals. So you get those for time served. So I myself haven't seen combat, and I'd say I'm quite fortunate for that we live in a world at the moment I don't have to. So, but those are ones earned through time served.
How do you balance that, though? Because you train for combat, you train for the potential of something that might happen. Is it always in the back of your mind? Is it heightened by anniversaries such as today?
I think you're always aware, and they make it very clear when you join up that you might be in a situation where you have to. So I think that those who do join up are willing to serve and are ready to serve if called upon.
The old adage goes, history has a habit of repeating itself. How important is it for you, as somebody that's taken on that mantle of service, taking it forward, that we don't lose sight of the stories of such of your grandparents. You know, lots of this generation, there are only a few left now, and you know, at the 90th anniversary, there's every chance we won't hear firsthand from the people who saw it themselves. How important is it, though, that we continue that legacy to kind of guide the principles of, you know, all of us as individuals, but also all of those who serve?
I think it's really important, and I think that people nowadays are more open to talking about things like going to war. If you look at the previous generation who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think they're more willing to talk about the sacrifices that they've made. And I think if we can have those open and honest conversations, we'll have the respect and the remembrance to go forward and understand what they gave for us.
A very valid point. Afghanistan, Iraq, Falklands, there have been many conflicts and flashpoints since that servicemen and women have sacrificed their lives for, and equally their time of professionalism. What does the rest of today have in store for you? You're obviously here with us at 7:45 in the morning. Where will the rest of the day go?
A strong coffee next, and then off to Westminster Abbey, I think. So I've got the ceremony there, which is a great privilege and an honour to be invited towards, and I'm really looking forward to the service and sharing this day with other colleagues and members of all services and civil servants as well.
Well, it's an apt moment to thank you, Aaron, for your time. An apt moment as well also to show you these live helicopter images over central London, preparations at pace for the commemorations across not just London, but also the rest of the United Kingdom and further afield today. We will see people gathering in Horse Guards Parade for that concert that John Healey, the Defence Secretary, was referencing earlier to us. And we will also have the 2-minute silence across the UK and further afield as well at midday. Do stick with us here on Sky News for this 4th day of celebrations and commemorations to mark VE Day. Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we'll be speaking to someone who lived during the Blitz and hearing about their life in wartime Britain.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a 4th indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran? No. Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing. As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's He's entitled to ask me questions.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about...
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News get the full story first.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
The morning will be mostly dry with sunny spells. Northern and western parts look like having the best of the sunshine, although cloud will build up as the day warms up. A few light and quite isolated showers, mainly in the northeast. Temperatures similar to yesterday, 13 to 18. The afternoon will bring little change, although the cloud will largely dissipate later. More or less between the oak and grass pollen seasons now, so levels will be low, generally rising to moderate over some southwestern parts. High elsewhere.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
For 8 months during the Second World War, people across the United Kingdom were under attack nearly every night in a bombing campaign known as the Blitz. But what was it like to live during that time? Well, with us now is Patrick McDougall, who lived in Edinburgh during the war, and Duncan Barrett, author of Blitz Kids. Good to have you both with us. Thank you for sharing your time. Patrick, if you will, take us back 80 years ago. Where would we have found you during the Blitz?
80 years ago, I was a child in Edinburgh, and on the 8th of May, it was my mother's birthday, so we were first of all celebrating that. But soon the news broke that VE Day, and my father decided that that evening he would take me up Arthur's Seat, which is a hill in Edinburgh. And my mother couldn't come because my 8-month-old sister needed looking after. So it was just us. We went up as far as I could get, and we sat down and we watched as the blackout curtains were torn down and twinkling lights suddenly appeared all over Edinburgh, all over the city. It was magical. I've never forgotten it. And it was such a good place to see it all from. You were looking down on the city and suddenly a window lighting up there, another window lighting up there, because although it wasn't yet fully dark, people were putting on all their lights and taking down the curtains and celebrating, I suppose you'd say. It was, as I say, magical.
A very kind of strong, powerful metaphor for what had just been announced earlier that day.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, I thought it was part of my mother's birthday celebration.
The innocence and purity of children. Eh? And talk to me about being a child, being moved during the Blitz. It's a story that many experienced. But what was
this, of course, is not a direct memory of mine, but at the beginning of sometime early in 1940, my father feared that Edinburgh was going to be bombed just like London. It wasn't in the end, but he thought it was. And he evacuated my mother to a cottage 20 miles away from Edinburgh in the middle of nowhere with me, aged a year or two. And that was all fine, except that only a few days after we'd moved there, the first German aircraft to be shot down in Scotland landed about 120 metres away. And my mother moved us back to Edinburgh the following day. And when I asked her, years later, well, I said, did you feel you were more at risk in the country? No, she said. I had to move back to escape the press.
You were being hounded even 80 years ago.
It was a big local story for all the Scottish newspapers, and they all had journalists and so on there, and she was fed up.
And these are stories that you've pulled together, and I guess there's such a breadth and variety of experiences. Some of kind of almost kind of wry humour in kind of escaping the press, through to children and families who were torn apart, during this time.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we interviewed about 80-odd people researching this book, and their stories really do kind of run the gamut. When the book was published, we sent copies to our interviewees, and that was their first opportunity to read other people's stories, essentially. And one guy I interviewed in Birmingham, actually, which did have a pretty bad blitz, one of the worst outside London, but he had quite a good war, as you might say. Like, he really enjoyed himself collecting shrapnel and playing in the bomb sites and so on. And he said, when I read some of these other stories of people whose parents died or their pets were killed or all these terrible things happened, he felt quite bad. He said, you know, my war, I basically enjoyed myself. You know, I shouldn't say it, but I was sad when the war ended because it was so much fun. But I said to him, you know, that's kind of what the book is about, is we're trying to capture the breadth of those experiences from, you know, the tragic and the terrible experiences right the way through to the joy and the kind of innocence of childhood that survives even the worst situations.
1945, 8th of May. What were the preceding months like? Once those lights had come back on, once the light was back in the world, certainly in Edinburgh for you, what were the preceding months, the months post like?
Well, they were pretty grey by comparison. And in fact, in early 1946, my parents, particularly my mother, who, being Australian, found Edinburgh greyer than some, decided to emigrate. And they emigrated to Kenya, which is where I spent the rest of my childhood. So I didn't have that much experience of UK after the war, just the next 9 months or so before they left.
Really appreciate you both coming in and joining us. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for bringing them together. Plenty more coverage on VE Day here on Sky News.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. On today's programme, a UK-US trade deal finally appears to be over the line, with updates expected from both Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump later today. It's Thursday, the 8th of May. Sky News understands the UK and US have reached a trade deal, with the Defence Secretary hailing the strength of the special relationship.
What this reminds us about is just how indispensable the US is as an ally to the UK on economic security and on national security.
And good morning from Rome, where the world watches on as we await another vote for the next Pope. Cardinals are set for a second day of conclave to elect a new Pope after failing to reach an agreement yesterday. Will the smoke be black or white? All eyes on the Sistine Chapel chimney again this morning. We'll be live throughout when voting begins at around 8:30.
Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News Breakfast. President Trump is poised to announce a new trade deal today, which Sky News understands is to be with the UK. The detail remains unclear, but pressure's been mounting on the White House to secure trade deals amid its global tariff war. British trade negotiators have been in Washington this week. That's as the UK also pushed for a deal ahead of a UK-EU summit on the 19th. Well, posting on his platform Truth Social, Donald Trump said the following: big news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. That's 3 p.m. for us here in the UK. The Oval Office concerning a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country. The first of many signing off with 3 exclamation marks. Well, in the past hour, I got reaction from the Defence Secretary, John Healey.
You wouldn't expect me to preempt what the Prime Minister or the President may say, but what this reminds us about is just how indispensable the US is as an ally to the UK on economic security and on national security. And we've been conducting hard negotiations with the US ever since Keir Starmer went to the White House in February, trying to secure a good economic deal for Britain. And during that time, I have to say, ministers like me have stepped back and refrained from commenting on those discussions in order to give the negotiators the space to secure the best possible deal for Britain. So any live discussions or timelines really aren't for me this morning.
Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, the Defence Secretary there, being very tight-lipped. What are your sources telling you regarding this agreement?
Well, Gareth, Sky News can confirm that the UK and the US have agreed the outline of a trade deal. That trade deal will be announced by Donald Trump at 3 p.m. today. We are the big and respected country that Donald Trump referred to in that Truth Social post earlier today overnight when he posted from Washington. So it's a big win for Keir Starmer. He is the first country to get a trade deal with Donald Trump in his second presidency. There will be hopes of big relief for key industries like the steel sector, which the government stepped in to partially run just a few weeks ago, and the car sector. Wonder whether Keir Starmer will treat that as a big win and want to be seen close to the car sector later today when he makes his announcement. 25% tariffs were slapped on both industries by this man, Donald Trump, a couple of months ago. Now Keir Starmer will be hoping later today he can announce that he's got that down to 10% or maybe 0%. We don't yet know the fine print. What we do know is that it is a substantial deal. We also know that Downing Street will hope to be able to claim that this will save jobs at a point where those tariffs on goods going from the UK to the US were putting jobs at risk. Downing Street now want to be able to say that they have saved jobs in the process. As politics goes, it is a victory for Keir Starmer's patient and calm approach. He took a big risk by hugging Donald Trump close all the way through since that presidential election in November. There have been highs and lows from that approach. Highs when he went to the White House in February and was showered in praise by the US president. Lows when Britain was also caught up in those tariffs that Donald Trump announced in the last few weeks, hurting large parts of the UK industry. and all exports going from the UK to the US. But now a big win if, as expected later today, Donald Trump and Keir Starmer are both able to announce that Britain is the top of the queue for a trade deal. That in itself is a surprise. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was reporting that the UK was lower down the list of priorities for the White House, behind countries like Japan. Japan's still up there, but not in front of the UK, we now understand. It's a massive moment for trading relations. The UK this week signing the heads of a deal with India, controversial deal there. We're also in the middle of negotiations with the EU. Cabinet ministers have been telling me that all three deals announced broadly at the same time has been the goal of Keir Starmer for some time.
You've got the world's biggest economy in the form of the United States, the world's sixth biggest economy in the form of the United Kingdom, but there are gulfs between them. You've got a $30 trillion economy and a $3 and a bit trillion economy. To what degree do we expect this to be a balanced trading relationship? Politically, Donald Trump needs the wins, but economically, the UK needs the wins too. Are we going to have been able to have met in the middle, or do we expect that the UK had to give a little bit more than the US?
Well, we're going to have to see the kind of balance sheet of this trade deal later today. Britain will have been asking for relief for the steel industry and the car industry, and will hope to try and reduce that 10% tariff on all goods, but government sources were playing down the ability to do that just a couple of weeks ago. So whether that 10% tariff remains, it may do, it may not. We just simply don't know. But you're right, Gareth, there are going to have to be concessions. And nobody thinks that the White House is a pushover when it comes to negotiations. So what could those concessions look like? Well, there's been discussion for weeks that there could be cuts, reductions in what's called the digital services tax. That's a tax on those giant tech companies like Facebook. If they do that, and it's been an ask of the White House, then that means that people like the owners of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, one of the richest people in the world, will be getting a tax break at a time where taxes in the UK on ordinary people, working people, are going up, and disability benefits are going down. That will be controversial. We also think that there's been concessions, not in the type of food products that can enter the UK from the US, because we're not lowering our food standards, but in the amount of food products that could go from the US to the UK. The quotas will be increased of US goods that can go to the UK. And what that will mean is that UK manufacturers of foods could face greater competition, prices driving down, yes, but possibly at the expense of UK industry. It's the reverse of that situation that Donald Trump is trying to tackle. But really, Gareth, we'll get the outline and we'll get the sort of vibe and we'll get the big picture politics of that trade deal today. And there is no doubt in that framing, it will be a massive win for Keir Starmer. But trade deals are huge, they're complex. And ultimately, like the India trade deal, which only increases growth by 0.1% by 2040, they don't automatically mean a huge boost to the economy, even if they provide relief for certain sectors. So the wins and the losses will take some time to shake down, even after the kind of rosy moment in the UK and the US that we get later today.
Sam, for the moment, thank you so much. Just a reminder to our viewers as well, more on the Politics Hub live blog on the website and app. One of our other big stories today is Conclave. Let's take you to Mark Austin in Rome.
Yes, good morning from Rome, where the wait for a new pope goes on after black smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel last evening. It means the 133 cardinals locked inside failed to come to a decision in the first vote of the conclave, so they will have another crack at it today. Let's bring in our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins, who is at St Peter's Square this morning. So here we go again, Siobhan, all eyes on the chimney and this rather tense wait for the announcement of the new pope.
That's exactly it. I feel at the moment we're in the calm before the storm, because yesterday, when we were in that period where it was possible that the smoke could come out of the chimney, which is right in the background on the top of the Sistine Chapel back there. This square was packed, we're told by the authorities, with 45,000 people. Now, what's been happening today is around 8 o'clock this morning, the 133 cardinals had a mass. They're then going into the Sistine Chapel, where we understand that the voting will begin at about 9:30 local, so in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Now, if they manage to have a two-thirds majority this morning on who they want to be the next pope, if they do it in the first vote, then any time from around 10:15 local, we could see white smoke coming out from the chimney. If the first vote fails, then there'll be a second vote before lunch, and then we'll be looking again into the early afternoon, trying to see if there's white or black smoke. They'll then break for lunch and come back around 4 o'clock to do the next 2 rounds of voting. And if you remember, the last 2 popes have been elected in 4 or 5 rounds of voting. So it's very possible that we could get white smoke today. The things that kind of throw it out is that there's a much bigger conclave than ever before, 133 cardinal electors this time, the majority of them appointed by Francis. And we understand that before they got here, many of them hadn't even met each other. So that might mean that there's more discussion needed for them to come to one position on who they believe should lead the Catholic Church going forward into the future. When you talk to people here, very mixed bag about who they want to follow up from Pope Francis. So let's hope that the cardinals inside the Sistine Chapel are more united, and fingers crossed for white smoke today.
Siobhan, thank you very much indeed. It really is one of the world's oldest dramas. We'll be keeping an eye on it throughout the day. 4 more votes today, and we will have all the coverage of that. Now back to Gareth in London.
Mark, thank you so much. Plenty more from Mark and the team in Rome over the coming hours and, of course, the coming days. We will watch that chimney with great attention. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories. And let's first of all join the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartlidge, who joins us. Good to have you with us. It's obviously a very poignant day, VE Day, 80 years since peace was declared in Europe. Obviously, Second World War continued in the Asian theatre and the Pacific theatre for longer. How do you reflect on a day like today?
Well, I think it's so important because, as you know, and it's very poignant in many ways, we are losing the living link to those who served, as it were. Some still with us, and it's been wonderful to see them involved in recent days. We saw on Bank Holiday Monday someone who's going to be 101 very soon, you know, holding the torch that set off the procession down the Mall. But I think, for me, there are 2 really critical things. The first is to honour our veterans, and the second is to look at the world as it is today and take lessons from what's happened. And I think the most important of all, especially when you look at Russia-Ukraine, is to never be complacent about the threats we face and to back our armed forces in what, unfortunately, are unstable times.
Talk about those unstable times. You reference Russia and Ukraine there. You have to, especially on a day when we commemorate featuring Europe. There is still full-scale war on the European continent 80 years later, and it's been going on now for years itself. How confident are you that that can be brought to an end when you see Russia celebrating its victory over the Nazis and it's utilising the victory of 80 years ago as a premise for continuing war 80 years on?
You're absolutely spot on, and you know, we all desperately want to see peace there, and above all, the people of Ukraine who've been bombed, who've been brutalised by Russia's totally unprovoked invasion. In fact, when we debated VE Day in Parliament this week, I made the point that it was so moving to see Ukrainian soldiers as part of our VE Day procession, and I said I hope that they will have a VE Day one day, and I really hope they do. But we can't have a sort of gesture peace for a few days so that Putin can do his thing in Moscow with his fellow dictators. What we need is a proper, lasting, sustainable peace, and one that Russia isn't seen to gain from, frankly. And so, unfortunately, we have no choice. We've got to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. We've got to keep supporting them, but learn the lessons from that today and from the wars of the past, which are, you've got to stand up to aggressors.
How concerned are you about the situation between India and Pakistan?
I think it's important that we, do encourage de-escalation. I think the government are right about that. Obviously, they've got to use all their sort of diplomatic channels and strength. But as you know, these are 2 major military powers, nuclear-armed. and we don't want to see wider escalation, particularly with the instability we have in the world as it is today.
You referenced their important partners. It looks as though, it appears, Sky News understands, that two very important partners with a special relationship set to announce a trade deal later today. Donald Trump posting about it on Truth Social. We've heard from 10 Downing Street spokesperson saying that Sir Keir Starmer will make a statement in due course. This must be a good day for the UK.
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, we've not had any definitive news that there will be a trade deal. We've not had the equivalent of our white smoke, dare I say it. But I hope that we do. In principle, of course, in our party, we want to see strong trading relationship with what you're right to describe as our close ally, the United States, closest military ally, economic partner. But as you know, the devil is always in the detail, and we will await those details as they arise.
What will be the key areas of concern, the key areas of focus for your party?
Well, I think that, I wouldn't want to get drawn into trying to speculate what might be in it. Frankly, who knows? I think that you have to remember we're a service economy. So we want to, if there is a trade deal, we need to see good access for services. What's going to happen with those tariffs? But it is entirely speculative at the moment. In principle, we want to see a good deal for the UK.
But there are areas that the UK holds very dearly and has very stringent rules and regulations in, and the United States has a different perspective on healthcare, for example, food standards, for example. We've talked lots about chlorinated chicken, about growth promoters in meat production. We've talked about privatisation of healthcare in the US compared to the NHS that we have here in the UK. Surely there will be those areas, for example, that the diplomats and the discussions and the government will have to have done a good job to defend, because otherwise, how will they be able to defend this trade?
But Gareth, as you know, it depends on the depth. There's been some reporting, and it is all speculative, it has to be said, that this might be quite a thin deal, like a sort of top-level deal. So it's very hard for me to comment on that without seeing it. Yes, there have been areas of discussion before which might be controversial. Perhaps, therefore, it would be surprising if those were included, but that is, without wishing to be repetitive, entirely speculative. I hope we get a deal in principle. It'd be good for the country, but we will look at the details very carefully.
A little frustrating for a party that was in power for 14 years that the Labour Party's done this in 9-10 months?
Not at all. I mean, by the way, first of all, it's had to because of the tariff situation. When we left the EU, for those of us who, I'd been Remain, but I accepted the result. This was a democratic decision for me. One of the big advantages was an independent trade policy. We didn't see any enthusiasm for that from Keir Starmer. He wanted to stay in the customs union, which would have meant we couldn't vary our tariffs, and therefore effectively would not have had an independent trade policy. So it's brilliant that he's converted to welcoming these negotiations. He's now got his India deal, which we have seen very little detail on. I hope we do get a good deal with the US, but it remains to be seen what the detail is. And I think the wider point is, why do we do trade deals to support the economy? We mustn't forget that out there in the UK today, businesses are struggling with recently imposed very high taxes. We've seen a report this morning from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, which says that the biggest impact on the UK economy is not tariffs, it's the national insurance rises on employers imposed by Rachel Reeves.
It's fair to say, though, equally, that taxation did reach prior record highs under the Conservative government. The other thing I just want to also just pick up on is reports in the papers, figures from the National Audit Office with regards to the cost of housing migrants in this country, figures that are astronomically higher than was first thought.
But Gareth, 2 points. First of all, this thing about taxes under us, right? They
were at
17-year
highs.
Wait a minute. Of course they were. Why? I was Rishi Sunak's PPS throughout the pandemic. When we put in that place $500 billion of support, which we borrowed, 400 billion roughly for the pandemic, 100 billion for energy bills after Putin invaded Ukraine. Guess what? Taxes went up. And we were open about that. But at the time, the only call we had in the Treasury from politicians across the board, from the media, from everyone, was for even more support. So don't pretend there's some parallel universe where taxes weren't going to go up after all that happened. The fact is, the choices
that have been better explained to the country, though, as that was happening concurrently? Do you think the messaging could have been better about that?
When Rishi's Chancellor always said there will be a cost for these measures, of course, and the public understood that. The issue is, of course, when the bills come, no one wants to have to pay them, but we all know that was going to happen. When I canvassed on the doorstep, the one thing the public accepted is that taxes have gone up because of those huge borrowing costs from the pandemic and so on. The difference is now you know, there are different choices. So, you know, as I just said, and I think it's really important, huge rise in employers' national insurance. That what the NISR have said today is that's pushing up inflation, it's reducing jobs in the economy, and it actually means the government will get less revenue from it. That decision was taken against, for example, what I think we should be doing, and what we've said, is going further and faster on reducing the welfare budget, which will actually increase the supply of labour into the economy and will be really important. So there are choices to make now, but when we were faced with borrowing that vast amount of money at the time to keep the country safe during lockdown, we had to do it, and it was always going to have an impact.
Just finally, just revert back to our first thought. You will be going to Westminster later today?
Yes, so there's a service in Westminster Abbey at midday. Many MPs, ministers will be attending. A great privilege, and because the most important thing is that we all say thank you to those who served our country in the Second World War.
A sentiment many will agree with, surely. James Cartlidge, Shadow Defence Secretary, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump has offered to help diffuse escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. For their part, Pakistan's leader has promised to retaliate to India's deadly strikes on his country, fueling fears that the two nuclear-armed powers are on the brink of war.
I get along with both. I know both very well, and I want to see them work it out. I want to see them stop. And hopefully they can stop now. They've gone tit for tat, so hopefully they can stop now. But I know both. We get along with both countries very well. Good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
Let's bring in our India reporter Neville Lazarus joining us now. Neville, and it's worth considering, is it not, the strength of the relationship that's reported to exist between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi of India. If anyone is placed to maybe play an intermediary, it is Donald Trump. But at the same time, we also need to kind of consider his flittishness when it comes to global geopolitics. Do you get a sense that there is openness for both sides to see the United States play some role?
Definitely, the United States can play a major role. It probably is working the lines in the background through back channels on both countries, considering the American president and his unconventional ways in terms of international politics. Definitely he can play a part. He's very close to, he says Prime Minister Modi is a good friend of his. Every time they meet, they hug. And America does have a great influence, not only in India, but in Pakistan now as well. We've seen over the last 2 days, there's been very heavy shelling and artillery and mortar shelling across the line of control. That is the sort of de facto border between India and Pakistan. It stretches for about 740 kilometers in Kashmir. India says 13 people have died, including a soldier, in these shellings that have happened over the last 2 days across the border in India. There are similar reports on the other side as well from Pakistan. Now, India has maintained that it has completed what it set out to do, was to hit terror camps, terror infrastructure in Pakistan, the 9 sites that they hit. Pakistan denies that terror organizations and camps exist in their country, but that's has been what they have been saying for a very long time. India doesn't believe it. India says now it is in the ball of Pakistan, and any kind of retaliation will be responded with. On the other hand, Pakistan says that many people have died. 31 is the number they have quoted in the air attacks that happened yesterday. And the Prime Minister goes on to say that he will avenge every drop of blood and has given the military a free hand to conduct any action they feel in self-defense and a time and place of their choosing. So both nuclear-armed neighbors ratcheting up sort of the tensions between the two countries. In just a short while ago, we heard the Pakistani Defense Ministry spokesperson saying that they have shot down 12 Indian drones in Pakistan airspace, and some which were next to Karachi and Lahore. Now, we cannot confirm this, but both sides still in an escalation of tensions between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, and I'm sure the world is watching with great concern.
Neville joining us live. Thank you so much. It's 8:24. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other headlines now. A 3-day ceasefire proposed by Vladimir Putin's come into place today. The Russian president planned the ceasefire to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day parade, where he'll be welcoming more than 24 world leaders at the event. Ukraine's not agreed to the proposal, dismissing it as theatrics, instead suggesting a 30-day pause. Meanwhile, China's President Xi Jinping has arrived in the Kremlin in Moscow, where he's meeting Russia's president. The pair are holding talks on a range of issues, but Ukraine and the developing situation in India and Pakistan will likely play high on the agenda. The meeting appears to have got off to a good start, with the pair calling one another dear friend. Iran's foreign minister has denied multiple reports linking his country to an alleged terrorist plot targeting the Israeli embassy in London. The 5 Iranian men were arrested across England on Saturday over what counter-terror police say was an alleged plan to target a single premises. The Times and other media outlets claim the location was the embassy. Well, in a statement, the Iranian foreign minister said the following: Iran is under no uncertain terms categorically rejecting any involvement in such actions, and confirms that we have not been informed of any allegations via proper diplomatic channels. Iran has urged the UK to engage so that we may assist any probe into credible allegations. Timing and lack of engagement suggests that something is amiss, going on to say there is a history of third parties bent on derailing diplomacy and provoking escalation, resorting to desperate measures, including false flag operations. The Israeli embassy, meanwhile, has also been approached for comment. Bank of England widely expected to cut interest rates this afternoon. Experts predicting that the cost of borrowing will fall by 0.25% to 4.25%. The announcement delayed by 2 minutes because of the 2-minute silence at midday for VE Day. Let's talk about an interim report into a fire that caused that widespread disruption at Heathrow Airport in March. Sadie's here for more details. In some respects, lots of report, but still not many answers.
Yeah, so we all remember March 21st as a day we found out that Heathrow Airport, the UK's largest airport, one of the world's busiest airports, relies on power from one substation. So that when that substation caught on fire, that airport had to shut down, the runway was closed, hundreds of thousands of passengers were affected by it. And we all had lots of questions, didn't we, about our country's energy resilience. Well, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, at the time, ordered a report. He said he wanted a clear picture of the incident to understand any wider issues, any wider lessons to be learned on energy resilience for critical national infrastructure, both now and in the future. He asked that report from the National Energy System Operator, or NESO. That's the report that's come out. He gave them 6 weeks to come up with an interim report. It's come out, we've had a look at it. And it looks like something ChatGPT could have come up with. It is 30 pages of definitions and terms. There's a timeline of events, which actually, if you'd been watching Sky News on the day, you'd know what happened and what happened when. And lots of descriptions. So if I look at this, there's 2 pages on roles and responsibilities, explaining to you who the London Fire Brigade are and why they were involved, who the Metropolitan Police are and why they were involved, what is the Department of Transport and how are they involved. I mean, it is stuff, as I say, that ChatGPT could have come up with. An estimated 60 to 100 million pounds of losses for airline operators. 270,000 passenger journeys were impacted. 40,000 homes were without power. The entire Heathrow Airport, all 5 terminals shut. It is so inadequate after six weeks. We still don't know how the fire started. So I'm keen to know what the Energy Secretary makes of it. We've asked his department the question and we wait to see what they say.
Sadie, for the moment. Thank you so much, Sadie Chowdhury there. Let's bring you up to speed on the weather at 8:28 on a Thursday morning.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Mostly dry, settled this week, varying cloud amounts, turning warmer by the weekend. Not as hot, though, as last week. Mostly fine now, chilly and quite sunny in the north and west. The morning will stay mostly dry, sunny spells best over those northern and western parts. Cloud building up as the day warms up. A few light and isolated showers, mainly up in the northeast for its part. Temperatures similar to yesterday's, 14s, low to mid-teens. The afternoon bringing little change, although the cloud will tend to dissipate later. Most places sunny into the evening, rather murky though near some North Sea coasts. Essentially dry overnight, starry for many, a little chilly along where the longer spells of clear weather persist. And tomorrow, another mostly fine day. A few light showers about the west of Ireland, most at risk. Warmer for many, especially near eastern coasts.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we'll be live with Mark in Rome. Cardinals there holding a second round of voting to elect a new pope.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back to Rome, where just behind me in the Sistine Chapel, cardinals are once again gathering to choose the next leader of the Catholic Church. In their first vote yesterday, the 133 cardinals failed to decide who the next pope would be. The first black smoke rose from that famous chimney in the Sistine Chapel last night, indicating the conclave had not reached a majority in the first round of voting. The cardinals were locked behind the doors of the Sistine Chapel, cut off from the outside world, without their phones. The building was also swept for listening devices. It is all done in huge secrecy, this, and we wait for their decision to be made. All that ceremony yesterday, but there is this incredible secrecy about all this, isn't there? With jamming, equipment for mobile phone signals and everything. Black smoke last night. Talk us through what we can expect today.
Well, the secrecy will continue, and it was exasperating for us who are used to getting regular information on almost everything else that's going on in the world. But here, the ancient gift of secrecy carries on. But today, they will hold a mass to start their day, and then they will go into the first vote. There'll be 2 votes this morning, then they'll have a break for lunch and come back for a further 2 votes, if they're necessary, this afternoon, making a total of 4 today. And as we discovered yesterday, these votes take quite a long time, with 133 cardinals. It is a process that does have the demands of time. We learnt, that it's not easy for some of the cardinals who don't have Italian as their natural language. And so all of that is a factor that I think is making it a much more complex process for those who are moving it through today.
Yes, but so 2 votes this morning, 2 votes this afternoon if they are needed, and we will only get, well, it'll be white smoke, won't it, if it's the first vote, because we'll only get the black smoke after the 2 votes.
That is correct. That is exactly correct. If the first vote delivers a result, and 89 or more cardinals have chosen a single name, then we will get white smoke immediately, quite early this morning, probably early in mid-morning. And if not, then it'll go to the second one, and either that will be white if the second vote is successful, or if they've both been unsuccessful, we'll get black smoke.
Right, and then if there is white smoke, talk us through what happens then.
Well, if there's white smoke, people will run to St. Peter's Square. There's a great sense in Rome that, this is their bishop being elected, and by their priests, because each cardinal has their own parish, albeit as a titular priest. They're not the actual priest. So all the people of Rome, if they wish to, will come here. There'll be an amazing atmosphere, and it takes about an hour for the process to be completed in the Sistine Chapel. And that is that the new Pope will go and be dressed in the famous white cassock. He may choose to wear the red mozzetta. Pope Francis didn't. That's the red cape that is worn over the top of the cassock. And then he takes the homage of his cardinals. The rain is coming, which is always a good sign. Yeah. He'll take the homage of his cardinals, and then he'll be brought. And first of all, the proto-deacon, that's the senior cardinal deacon, will read out the famous Habemus Papam and the name in Latin of the person that the cardinals have chosen. And then it takes a bit of time because they put out the balcony awning, they prepare a few things inside, and then with the Master of Ceremonies and the priest who's holding the microphone, they will come out. The apostolic blessing will take place, and the new Pope will communicate as he chooses. And Pope Francis was very humble and called upon the crowd to pray for him. And then at the end, he rather surprisingly said, look, have a safe journey home and sleep well. And I think everyone was so surprised by that. But, the new Pope will have a chance, both symbolically by how he appears and how he speaks, to demonstrate exactly what his manifesto is as Pope.
Pope Francis apparently used to say quite often at the end of his little speech, lunch well. Which I never quite knew what he meant by that. But the people from all over the world come.
Yes, but it is a very Roman thing because he's the Bishop of Rome. But people are here anyway. This is a Jubilee year for the Roman Catholic Church, which has begun on Christmas Day by Pope Francis. There are lots of people visiting. Of course, when Pope Francis died, it was full of young people. But there are tourists and there are pilgrims. I had to pass 2 lots of pilgrims coming here on my way. They're all here and excited to see who is chosen.
Also with us, Father Stephen Wang, rector of the Venerable English College here in Rome. Welcome.
Nice to be here with you.
Could be a big day. No surprise last night to see black smoke?
No. The only surprise was how late it was and how long it took. And I think we forget yesterday evening wasn't a normal vote. It was a vote that took place after all the prayer and the ceremonies, and there was that extra sermon, that extra homily to exhort and encourage the cardinal electors, and they had to have their supper at some time as well. So it was about 9 o'clock Rome time, I think, just as the light was dropping, but clear enough that people could see from the squares, which was very exciting.
Yes, you don't have to tell us. We were sort of speculating all sorts of things were going on, but eventually we got the black smoke. Do you think there's a chance of white smoke today. We were talking to a lot of people who's saying that, there's so many cardinals, so many new cardinals, that it could be a long conclave. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, maybe I'll have to eat my words, but I think they're right. I think it's more likely to be longer than shorter. If you think of recent popes, Pope Francis, I think, was 5 ballots, Pope Benedict was 4, and Pope John Paul II was 8, so it took a little over 2 days. And it's certainly true that the cardinals, there's a great number of them, and they don't know each other well. I keep hearing that. They're from, obviously, all over the world, but they haven't had that many opportunities to meet each other. And because Pope Francis has chosen so many unexpected cardinals from different areas of the church, they wouldn't have been so networked and in a kind of fraternity before. So it's really important that they've had these days to get to know one another. And I think there will be a lot of genuine uncertainty amongst the cardinals about what the next step is for them.
Yes, and do you have a view on who it might be? I mean, do you have your own thoughts on that? That you would like to share with?
Well, I'm happy to share anything. My honest
think?
answer is I haven't a clue, and I really don't think the cardinals know. And I think the most important and significant moment would have been that first ballot yesterday evening, because for the first time, instead of all the gossip and the talking and the sitting in pizzas, having your Negroni or whatever you do, they actually saw the reality of what the first vote looked like. And they would see, oh, that's interesting. So-and-so did have a lot of support. And someone else we thought, actually, he's only got 2 or 3 votes and not the 20 we were expecting.
Yeah.
So this morning will be a very reflective time for them, I think.
It's interesting. Someone who covered a few conclaves said to me last night that this is moving day. So today is moving day, and that cardinals who see that the man that they were going to support doesn't have the numbers start thinking about where they're going to place their support.
Yeah, I think it's moving day, but I've read from, in fact, it was Pope John the 23rd who said this, that there can be a number of different moving days. People can coalesce around someone, there can be a lot of support, but then they can realise actually there's not enough critical mass here, and that person might drop down. John the 23rd said it's like watching peas boil in a pot. They come up, they bob up, and they bob down again. So it will be a very interesting day for them, and we'll probably see some rising and falling, a little bit like happens in the film Conclave. In that respect, it was quite an accurate film, I think.
Yeah, you say in that respect. What respect was it not, do you think?
Oh, I mean, in many, it was a great film,
yeah.
In terms of cinema. Lots, I think, was very accurate about the life of Rome and the Vatican and the processes of the conclave. There were 1 or 2 unfortunate mistakes in it. I mean, for example, I don't want to spoil the plot for anyone who hasn't seen it, but a key moment was a cardinal, I'll keep it like that, a cardinal hearing the confession of someone, and it was clear that he'd betrayed something that he'd heard in the confessional, and that would never, ever happen. So it slightly undermined the reality of the film for Catholic. Maybe, but I think for a lot of Catholics, you just thought this would never happen. It wasn't credible. But as I say, lots of it was interesting and very accurate, I think.
But broadly speaking, I mean, obviously it was well timed, but it was an interesting insight to something that we will never see. Well, I assume we'll never see. I mean, they might open up the Sistine Conclave to cameras eventually, but
what we've seen is the beauty of it.
Yes.
And undoubtedly the film delivers a great deal of that beauty, but no one can deliver it quite like the real place. And I think the preparation of the conclave yesterday was very moving, seeing the cardinals with that burden on their shoulders going into the Sistine Chapel and hearing about the peas coming up and going down. I think that those who are within the Sistine Chapel today will see that people get more. And then imagine if you're the person who is getting more and more votes, and then suddenly they drop away. I mean, all these feelings that have to be endured by the person who may be called upon to be St. Peter's successor. And that's a huge burden, I think, for them. And I imagine a time when they are very lonely and getting ready for what may be the loneliest role in the Roman Catholic Church.
I think so, and I think that came across in the film very well. what the men were facing. You can only do it in a dramatic way, but also the agony of conscience that many of them were going through. They really wanted the best for the church. They're not cynical political beasts, these cardinals. They want the best for the church. They want to choose the man who will fulfill this role and follow in the footsteps of St. Peter, as you said. And that's not an easy choice, I think, even in the heat of it.
No, it's interesting you talk about that because Stanley Tucci's character, I think it was, he didn't want to take on this job, quite clearly. But he said, oh, you'd have to be insane to want to be a pope. There was that feeling that this was such a, onerous task, as well as obviously a huge privilege, but that some popes might be seeing their name pop up or, hear that they're going to be in the running and might think...
But it's worth pointing out that I don't think a single cardinal is, if they're sensible, putting themselves forward for this, like you might put yourself forward for election in a normal political process anywhere in a democracy.
So there's no lobbying?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the Constitution is very clear that any lobbying would lead to some difficulties and is to be, well, it's not allowed. It's simply not permitted. I think that, again, it's quite difficult, and you'd be better at explaining this than me. It's the power of the Holy Spirit amongst them, which I think the majority of people who hear the word election simply can't even comprehend how that might work.
Yes.
Yeah, they're going in with certain ideas and preconceptions, but they're trying to be open to what, as you've said, what the Holy Spirit is saying to them. Now, what does that mean? It means being open to what God is doing in that chapel at that time, and how he is speaking to their hearts and souls, and not just to the mind. So it's a head and a heart and a gut thing, and they're responding to how the cardinals themselves are speaking. So it might be something really obvious, but it might be something quite mysterious that touches their heart and says, this is the man who can take on this responsibility.
Just stay with us a second. We've got Dr. Gavin Ashenden joining us, Associate Editor of the Catholic Herald. Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. What do you think will emerge from today?
It's a very exciting moment. It's a moment like no other, really. But it's exciting not only because we're choosing a pope, but we're also at, I think, a civilizational crossroads. All the conversations we've been having about the political future of our society are condensed in a microcosm in this particular choice. We've been looking for the right words to describe the different kind of candidates, and it's easy to talk about progressive and conservative, but I think that's wrong. I think what they're choosing between is a Chamberlain and a Churchill, someone who thinks the best way forward is by appeasing the culture, and someone who thinks the culture has become so dangerous or out of control that it has to be confronted. And that's a very difficult choice to make. It's not obvious what the right way forward is. But as your contributors have been saying, it's an act of God, it's an act of the Holy Spirit. I think the sense of responsibility for themselves personally, for the church, but actually for the whole of our society, which was built upon the same rock as the church. It's Christendom, most of the West. The future of our society will be profoundly affected by the choice that they make.
Right, so you would see this as a pivotal conclave, would you?
Absolutely. It's to do with free speech. It's to do with the freedom of conscience. It's to do even with the impact of technology, with the mystery of AI, all of which is poised to reduce human freedom, human autonomy, human rights. All these things flow from a relationship with Christ, and the relationship with Christ has been mediated by the Church. The responsibility on the Church to preserve the sacredness of humanity and the rights that flow from that is enormous and pivoting at this moment, I think.
I'm interested in what you say. In what way do you think it's about free speech?
Well, one of the things that's there are essentially three political models that we're faced with. If you like, in the last century, they've been fascism and communism and Christianity. And fascism and communism were profoundly inimical to human freedom, and Christianity wasn't. We have now the rise of Islam too, and on the whole, Islamic political societies have not been committed to the same freedom of speech or human rights we have. So we still have Christianity as being the guardian of human freedoms as we've experienced them, and it's also in the sense that we have the growth of technology and this extraordinary computerization of our society, once again, which reduces human freedom and human autonomy. So the way in which we, for example, deprive ourselves of a certain amount of internet or computing technology in order to regain our freedoms is an immensely difficult thing to do. But who is speaking on behalf of the sacredness of the human person? Capitalism isn't very good at doing it. Capitalism sees us as essentially cogs in an economic wheel. The left are very bad at doing it. They're perhaps the greatest threat. I don't think I'd look to Muhammad and the Islamic tradition. I would look to Jesus and the Catholic Church, and that we're electing somebody this morning for whom that's going to be their prime responsibility.
And someone who is going to face enormous challenges in the sense of the sexual abuse that's happened in the church, and how to get to grips with that, and I mean the financial issues surrounding the Vatican. These are challenges, you know, of a sort of secular nature that are going to have to be dealt with properly.
Well, you're absolutely right. The Catholic Church is made up of human beings, and human beings are vulnerable to perversity and dysfunctionality. And the two great scandals that the Catholic Church has had to deal with, because we're human beings, we're not immune from them, are the sex abuse scandal and a financial scandal of enormous proportions that people haven't been talking about, and that Pope Francis, unfortunately, God bless him, he failed to deal with either of them. For all his loquacity, for all his charm, for all his camera friendliness, these two icebergs remained undealt with at the heart of the Catholic Church. And you're quite right, the prime responsibility is to look inwards and to clean up the act of the Church and the institution itself. And that's going to be an absolutely enormous task, because an outsider comes in to take the helm to do it. Doubly difficult.
Gavin, thank you very much. Very interesting to talk to you. Thank you. And Father Steve, I just wondered, did you hear?
I did, yes.
You did. What did you make of that?
Well, I think we'd all agree probably there's a lot of truth in what the speaker was saying about the kind of crossroads we're at culturally and how many issues are coming to the surface. I'd just say it's the responsibility of the whole Church to respond to that. And we mustn't, in one sense, we mustn't put too much on the Pope. Of course, he's central to our Catholic faith. He's the Bishop of Rome, he's the Holy Father, but he's not going to solve every one of the world's problems, and he's not...
But, sorry to interrupt you, but does much happen in the Vatican, or in terms of public policy, that is not decided finally in the last resort by the Pope?
Yes, it does. In other words, there is a huge amount of work, socially, politically, morally, going on through the life of the Church. Remember, is it about 1.4 billion souls? And each diocese is working in profound levels with all these issues. And of course, I'm not, again, saying that the role of the Pope is unimportant, but just he's not the only one making policy. And the commitment of the Church to trying to deal with the sexual abuse crisis, to the financial reforms, to working at poverty, to working at some of the issues Gavin was speaking about, it's bigger than just what one man is doing, although he will have a big influence, definitely.
I just wonder, can we speak to Siobhan Robbins in St Peter's Square? Is that Siobhan... She's not there at the moment. It was interesting, Alistair. I was just trying to get a sense of the kind of atmosphere and the mood this morning after the black smoke yesterday.
Well, I think it's ebbed quite a bit, but that doesn't mean that people are not tuned to the fact that there could be an announcement. And people do literally run from different parts of Rome. I mean, this is my third conclave. They run to be present. Because they know they've got about an hour, because it generally takes about an hour from white smoke to the appearance of the Pope for the very first time. And so I think in that time, there's a chance to build a great sense of anticipation and party.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you've got the normal flow of visitors, you've got pilgrims coming and going, as always happens down Via della Conciliazione and into St. Peter's Square and right up and going through St. Peter's itself. But they all know that nearby, this momentous decision is being made by the colonists.
Yeah, a lot of the people I've spoken to, not surprisingly, being Italian, and a lot of them are talking about it's time for an Italian Pope again. What would you say about that?
What you said is true. I know a lot of Italians, obviously, here in Rome, and they've loved the different popes we've had, but they would love an Italian to be their own bishop here, and they'd feel very proud. And as we were just hearing about the excitement, they would be here in a flash. And I think so we're going to see a lot of excitement when the white smoke comes, not just those who are here already, but as we're hearing, people will be running and buses and trains, and it's going to be very exciting, particularly for the Italians.
Yes. Well, I think it was 450 years of Italian popes, and then the break with John Paul II, and then Benedict, and then Pope Francis. So 47 years, I think, without an Italian pope. But we will have to wait and see, and we will be watching the chimney on the Sistine Chapel. Black smoke last night, which means they haven't decided. They are back in the Sistine Chapel, voting, if necessary, 4 times today. So we will see what happens. For now, back to Gareth in London.
Breaking development from the Crown Prosecution Service saying that Jaime Nur Cabdirahman, aged 47, has been charged with the murder of 37-year-old Javinder Johal, who had died after being stabbed inside a Lloyds Bank in Derby on Tuesday. That statement from the Crown Prosecution Service. Previously, Derbyshire Police saying that 2 individuals had been arrested following those initial reports at 2:35 in the afternoon on Tuesday. But as I say, the CPS saying Jaime Nur Cabdirahman, aged 47, charged with that murder. More details to come in the coming hours. In the meantime, here's the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Mostly dry, settled this week, varying cloud amounts. Warmer by the weekend, although not as hot as last week. Mostly fine out there now. Chilly in the quite sunny north and west, though. The morning staying mostly dry, some sunny spells, their best over those northern and western parts. Cloud building, though, as the day warms up. A few isolated showers, mainly in the northeast. Temperatures similar to yesterday's. The afternoon will bring little change, although the cloud will tend to dissipate later. Most places sunny into the evening, rather murky in the North Sea.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. On today's programme, is a UK-US trade deal finally over the line? We've got updates from both Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump later today on Thursday, the 8th of May. Sky News understands the UK and US have agreed terms of a trade deal, with the Defence Secretary hailing the strength of the special relationship.
What this reminds us about is just how indispensable the US is as an ally to the UK on economic security and on national security.
And good morning from Rome, where the world watches on as we await another vote for the next Pope. Cardinals are gearing up for a second day of conclave to elect a new pontiff after failing to reach agreement yesterday. Will the smoke be black or white? All eyes on the Sistine Chapel chimney once again this morning. Voting is now underway. Good morning then from Rome, where we wait for a new pope, and that wait continues as the world watches on. Black smoke was seen billowing from the famous chimney in the Sistine Chapel last night, indicating the conclave had not reached a majority in the first round of voting. The College of Cardinals are locked behind the doors of the Sistine Chapel, cut off from the outside world, without their phones. The building has been swept for listening devices. The Cardinals will remain there until a decision is reached. Let's bring in our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, who is on St. Peter's Square once again this morning. And good morning, Siobhan. So another day of waiting and watching, and well, certainly last night it was all getting quite tense.
It was such a nervous wait last night. 45,000 people, we're told, packed into this square. And as the hours ticked by without any sign of smoke, you could tell people were getting really nervous. If anyone sort of shouted smoke because they saw a cloud, we heard people clapping spontaneously at one point, but it was all of saw the smoke, the black smoke, showing that there was no majority inside the Sistine Chapel. And today it's all begun again. So we know that the Cardinals are already back in the Sistine Chapel. They're voting, and they'll vote up to 4 times today, 2 times in the morning and 2 times in the afternoon if they don't get a majority. Now, the first time we could potentially see white smoke this morning is at around 10:30 local time, so in around half an hour. So we'll be all keeping our eyes pinned onto the tiny chimney, which is at the top of the Sistine Chapel there. If there's no majority at that point, we'll be watching again around lunchtime to see if there's been any decision made after the second vote.
OK, Siobhan, thank you very much. I think they were trying to jam her signal there. But another day of voting about to begin. Let's go back for now, though, to Gareth.
Mark, thank you so much, Mark, and the team in Rome there. Let's just bring you a few comments from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, speaking at the moment. Let's take a brief listen, shall we? Due to also speak again later with regards to that US-UK trade deal. We're expecting that announcement from the Oval Office from Donald Trump at 3 p.m. UK time. But this is the Prime Minister speaking live.
As you know, talks with the US have been ongoing, and you'll hear more from me about that later today. But make no mistake, I will always act in our national interest, for workers, businesses and families, to deliver security and renewal for our country. Because the world has changed decisively. I mean, I remember, and some of you will also too, the day the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. A landmark moment for my generation. A sense of freedom, of possibility, of peace. European countries finally free to choose their own future. I didn't think then that in my lifetime I would see Russian tanks entering a European country again. Yet here we are. And here we stand resolutely with the people of Ukraine, together with our allies, showing the strength of our values as well as the value of our strength. Now, a few weeks ago, I was with the Prime Minister of New Zealand to visit our forces delivering Operation Interflex in Wiltshire. This is a multinational military operation that has trained more than 50,000 Ukrainian troops for the front line. Men and women who are not soldiers by trade, far from it. They're accountants, they're builders, business people, you name it.
The Prime Minister there speaking in central London, referencing the fact he'll speak in more details regarding that US-UK trade deal that Sky News understands will be agreed. He's speaking after Donald Trump posted on his platform, Truth Social. The president saying the following, a big news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. That's US time, so 3 in the afternoon for us. The Oval Office concerning a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country, the first of many triple exclamation mark. Well, let's discuss this further with Ed Amari, who are with us in the studio. Ed, all caps, triple exclamation mark. A bit more of a muted response so far from the Prime Minister, but it looks as though something has been agreed.
Yeah, it's on, and we've had that from multiple sources now. It's just a question of, when that deal is going to... I guess kind of what the details, the precise details of it are, which sectors are covered by it. But this has been worked on for months now. You've had officials from the UK and from the US meeting in many, many different meetings. In fact, they've got meetings with the US trade representative, a guy called Jameson Greer, Howard Lutnick, who's the Commerce Secretary. And actually, I was in DC just a couple of weeks ago, and at that point, officials thought that they were going to get it done within the fortnight. And it's just 13 days since then, so that was quite right. This is not going to be a big trade deal. So this is not the kind of thing, those enormous kind of earth-shattering trade deals that take many years to negotiate. By definition, there are just too many things, too many areas where the UK and the US just still have big differences, including, for instance, on agriculture and whether hormone-fed beef, chlorinated chicken, is acceptable for import to the UK. But when you're looking at things like cars, when you're looking at steel, there are some areas there where the UK obviously now faces tariffs that it didn't have to before, which is a big part of this. And from the UK's perspective, there are certain taxes like the digital services tax, which the US has always disliked, which has been there as part of this negotiation. It's a massive deal for the UK, obviously, symbolically. It's a massive deal, maybe arguably even more so for Donald Trump, because he's able to say, look, these tariffs were there for a purpose. They were there to get people to negotiate. And look, the UK has done this deal, and the UK is a big G7 economy, and maybe others might do so as well. So it is a big moment, but the detail, I think that's going to be the question, is just how much of that detail we get and just what it means in practice for exporters. We're
going to have to work slightly in hypothetics then until that moment. If you're in Scunthorpe, if you're in Port Talbot, if you're in the Midlands working a car plant and potentially tariffs shift, because they're 25% at the moment, if they shift, big for those individual sectors. If there's a change in North London for the film production industry as well, potentially big there. But what about for the national economy? Because we're a $3 trillion economy compared to a $30 trillion economy. Once you get away from all the headline figures, how much will it move the needle in terms of growth, in terms of the economy, in terms of development?
Typically, when you look at these trade deals, the striking thing, Gareth, is when people actually kind of run through the numbers, and there's always some impact assessment of any trade deal. Invariably, you get to that figure, percentage of GDP figure, and invariably, it's kind of disappointingly small. And everyone's like, well, what's the point of this? So I imagine that moment will come. I don't think we're going to get an impact assessment today. But for those people, you mentioned Scunthorpe and Port Talbot, they're big steel producers. They have been affected by this. These are real, these tariffs, and they have had a real impact on car exporters as well. So JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, they've stopped their exports, or at least paused their exports to the US. So it has had a bearing on that. We do export a lot of stuff to the US. This is a tough time for the UK economy. There are still going to be tariff impacts anyway, even if this deal is agreed, because the big issue for the UK was more just the global picture. If everyone is nervous about the global economy because of these tariffs, what does that then spell for the UK economy? And the answer is everyone's quite nervous. And later on, the Bank of England is going to unveil its latest forecast. They're going to cut interest rates, at least everyone expects them to cut interest rates as well. Why? Partly because everyone is concerned about the global economy, and the UK always has an impact. You always faces an impact if the global economy is affected as well.
So the US will say tariffs worked for us. We got the first big respected economy over the line. We did a deal. Downing Street will go, well, it's actually the cool, calm heads that prevailed that allowed us to be able to do the deal, that we didn't jump like the EU did to retaliatory tariffs. We didn't do what Mexico and Canada did, China did. We went, hang on a second, let's do the art of the deal, as Donald would say, and get it over the line.
Yeah, exactly. I think Downing Street will be feeling vindicated in terms of the fact that they were saying people needed to keep cool and essentially just focus on negotiations, focus on staying calm, not retaliating unnecessarily. Although they said it was always going to be on the table as a possibility, didn't they? But nonetheless, I think they're going to feel vindicated on this. I think the most interesting thing will be, what we are going to have to give the US in order to gain from this trade deal. And as Ed was saying, we don't know how much of a large-scale kind of trade deal this is. It's probably not going to be humongous. And the other thing that I think is quite significant domestically for Keir Starmer is he's been in a quite tricky situation over the past week or so. Difficult local election results, the winter fuel allowance, we've had, PIP cuts to disability benefits, and lots of Labour MPs have started putting their head above the parapet and criticising the Prime Minister, criticising his policy. Ellen Egg Morgan, the leader of the Welsh Parliament, saying something similar, and some regional mayors as well. So if they have this win, this coup, it might slightly placate some of those Labour MPs who are feeling a bit nervous, a bit jittery, a bit concerned about Starmer's leadership, if he can show them, actually, hold on a second, look at the good work that I can do. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Lots of focus on both the Oval Office at about 3 p.m. UK time, also at some point on Downing Street. The sound of footsteps says that Sam Coates has arrived. You've been hearing from sources today that say it's done. As Ed was saying, it's now what exactly was done.
That's right. Look, from the politics, there's no doubt it's a win. Right? We can say that right off. It's Britain's the head of the queue. We weren't expected to be the head of the queue. It means that Keir Starmer's approach to Donald Trump has paid off. It's been controversial. It's been a roller coaster. But as Ed has been saying all morning, it really does depend on exactly what he's been able to negotiate, because nobody thinks that Donald Trump's White House is a pushover when it comes to negotiations. And whilst I have a hunch that there's good news for cars. Just some of the intel that's floating around, vigorous nodding from Ed. Good. It's always good when we're aligned. Makes me feel relieved. So I think Keir Starmer will want to claim a win when it comes to cars today, and you would hope steel as well. The government stepped in the steel industry, but sources were very pessimistic about getting rid of the 10% tariffs on everything going UK to the US. You've got that curveball of 36 hours ago where Donald Trump basically threatened to decimate the film industry outside America. Britain's TV and film industry is massive, and I know that there are huge amounts of worries around that. And then there are the questions of what are the concessions? Are we giving a tax break to people like Mark Zuckerberg, one of the richest men in the world, at a time where taxes are going up, disability benefits are going down? Let's be honest. It's easier to analyse the politics of a trade deal and call these things a win, which they are, than it is to dig into the inordinately complicated things, detail. Also, this is not the kind of comprehensive trade deal that you would be looking for, that we might have been looking for at one point with the US post-Brexit. This is a narrow trade agreement that deals with very specific problems that have been created by our closest ally, America. So it's only taking us near most of the way back, probably, to where we were before Donald Trump came in. So you've got to contextualise the win, not as some great advance for the UK economy, but minimising the damage that our alleged closest ally, our alleged special partner, has inflicted on us.
Let's bring in John Alty, the UK's former Director General for Trade Policy. John, good to have you with us. Your initial reaction to this morning's news?
Yes, well, as Sam was saying, I'm sure it will be put out as a big win, but the devil's in the detail, and we'll be looking for what is said on tariffs. I mean, it will be amazing if there weren't good news for cars and possibly steel, because that's been the main pain point so far. But what about pharmaceuticals, where there is a threat of future tariffs? What about the film industry? And then what's being given up? But also, are there any constraints from this deal in terms of the UK's relations with either Europe or China or other countries? So there's a lot to play for.
Can I ask, it's Ed Conway here, how significant is it that so many governments for such a long time, including the previous government, they've talked about the US being this kind of easy win, or at least this great promise after Brexit was negotiated. How significant is it that there is now a deal? I mean, is it genuinely a really big deal?
Well, I think, as you've said and Sam said, we expect it to be a fairly narrow deal, but it will be interesting to see what is said about things like the regulation of AI or tech or services, if anything. I mean, one could imagine that you could have a deal on the sort of immediate issues with a commitment that either there will be further negotiations or that regulators will get together and look to construct a framework which is business friendly. So there could be elements here that would lead on to more positive things and going beyond what Sam said, just getting back to almost where we were before.
And John, just talk to us about the process here. The headline announcement announced today, but there's been months of work preceding it. What comes next in the sequence of events?
Well, I mean, people have talked about a heads of terms, which sounds like a bit of a real estate deal to me. But I think it's an outline agreement, probably, because you will not have had time to produce a fully legalised text. So I would think that quite apart from any future commitments to continue talking, this agreement, which will, I assume, be signed by both sides, and therefore a degree of commitment to it, will have to be converted into some form of legal text, particularly on issues like tariffs. You get into all sorts of complexities about rules of origin, what counts as a UK export, all that sort of stuff.
John, my apologies. The Cardinals of Conclave are nipping at our heels, so we will leave it there, but really appreciate your insights and analysis. Thank you so much. Let's just bring it back to Mari and Sam for a few moments. Ed's had to go because, of course, Bank of England going to make an announcement at midday with regards to interest rates. Your thoughts, Mari, first of all, about how the opposition parties will be looking at this deal. What do you think will be key for them? We had the Shadow Defence Minister on earlier, James Cartlidge, and he said, look, let's just wait and see. But they will already have their key sticking points, surely.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what they want to react to once they've seen the deal in terms of the efforts that they made to try and get a US trade deal when they were in power. So they will be realistically looking for certain things that perhaps they already rejected or weren't sure whether they wanted to go for. We know that, some of the kind of controversial things that often get headlines are things like food standards and animal welfare standards. That's something that always gets huge headlines, chlorinated chicken. But nonetheless, the whole time they've been negotiating this, Labour have said that was a massive red line for them. So I think I would be surprised if something like that was in the deal, but you just never know. But James Cartlidge was being quite careful when he was interviewed by you earlier to try and say, I'm not going to preempt anything. I don't want to speculate on anything. We want to see the deal, and if it's good in parts, we will praise it, and the things that we don't like, we won't. But I think nonetheless, the opposition will be looking carefully at the ways they can maybe perhaps weaponise it in the same way they did slightly with the India trade deal and the way they attacked that deal. Kimmy Badenoch saying, I was already offered this and I said no to it. And it was quite interesting because actually then the Indian officials have come out and said that she didn't say no to it. But anyway, that's just beside the point to an extent, isn't it?
So we have India, Sam, which always feels as though it's weeks and weeks ago's news, but it was only in recent days. It's quite the sequence of events. You have India, then this announcement. Donald Trump kind of teed it up when he was with Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, in the Oval Office a couple of days ago, saying a big announcement was coming. The other thing that strikes me that's coming is this UK-EU summit on the 19th as well. To what degree do you think the timing for Downing Street's perspective, is quite nice that America goes first and the EU comes second.
Well, I know from cabinet ministers that they're pleased that there's a trio. They see the three trade deals, EU, US and India, as part of the same story for this nation. But also, I think it's a big relief for Downing Street that it's this way round, that you're having the US one first, because the danger with the EU one on May the 19th is, and that as well won't be a fully fledged deal. There'll be lots of things in that are just agreements to talk further on issues like EU youth mobility schemes. The danger of that was that Britain cozying up to a bloc that Donald Trump often criticises might set us back in our relations with the US. So it's good to get this over the line before there's any danger of that. Look, I think there are complications aplenty here. I mean, the Liberal Democrats are asking for there to be a vote in Parliament on the deal as agreed. Spoiler alert: I don't think they're going to get. I don't think there's going to be one. There is a nervousness about the winners and losers. There are losers from trade deals. There are individual companies, factories, and all the rest of it whose position in the market, whose market access will be squeezed and hurt by giving American companies, who are their rivals, a better deal to sell stuff into the UK. Trade deals are never as straightforward. Again, we talk about the politics because it's the first, and there's easy to understand political strategy, but you can never really tell the details. What the impact of a trade deal is for many, many years. And some of the things that this government has signed itself up to, like the last government, could be transformative, some of them not. And remember, the overall impact can be tiny. The India trade deal, 0.1% by 2040.
And just briefly, give us a sense of context, if you will. Have we ever seen a triumvirate of trade deals in kind of quite such close succession to each other? It feels quite a standout moment.
No. And the reason we haven't is because we couldn't negotiate our own trade deals for most of the period that we were part of the European Union and the Customs Union. So you don't have anything like this as a precedent. It could be a defining few weeks for Keir Starmer's premiership, or we could remember back to that moment where there was an international negotiation for Rishi Sunak, the Windsor Framework, which he thought was going to transform his reputation, only to discover that the public greeted it with a shrug. Let's see what happens.
Sam, thank you so much. Mari, appreciate it as well. Ed is somewhere else, but we appreciate him too. So much more to get through with regards to the trade deal. Plenty more on the Politics Hub, a live blog on the website and app. But in the meantime, let's take you to Rome.
Yes, welcome back to Rome, where just behind me in the Sistine Chapel, cardinals are once again gathering to choose the next leader of the Roman Catholic Church. In their first vote yesterday, the 133 cardinals failed to decide who the next pope would be. Black smoke rose from the famous chimney in the Sistine Chapel, indicating the conclave had not reached a majority in the first round of voting. The cardinals were locked behind the doors of the Sistine Chapel, cut off from the outside world. Without their phones, the building was also swept for any listening devices, and they will remain there until a decision is made. With me is Alistair Bruce and Father Stephen Wang. Alistair, first of all, theoretically, we're told that the voting could well have started again. Theoretically, we could see smoke imminently, but it would have to be
white smoke.
Right.
Yes, I mean, I think that we would be very fortunate for that to occur, because I think it would be terribly big to expect the 133 cardinals who didn't know each other particularly well, some don't speak Italian, to have formulated a settled decision so quickly. I would imagine that we will wait until about 12 o'clock local time, which is 11 o'clock in the UK, when we'll see the result of two election processes will be burnt together, and we will probably not see white smoke then. That's my guess, but we will be looking out for it anyway at 12 o'clock local.
Yeah, and if it's black smoke, in they go again.
They go off and have lunch, actually. That's the most important thing. And, a chance for quiet rest. And it's been a very long day for the cardinals yesterday, and it'll be potentially a very long day today, especially if they elect. And so I think, they are, some of them, approaching 80, and they won't want to be doing too much more than have the rest when they can. So they'll have lunch and a rest, come back and do two more elections this afternoon.
Right, and still the people will come. Yesterday, I think they were talking about 45,000, 50,000 people down there.
I think it's a great gathering point, particularly in the evening, particularly as the weather was lovely yesterday, and they came along because, it's a great story. It's at the heart of Rome, and the people of Rome are getting elected for them a new bishop.
Father Stephen, what do you think will be going through the minds of the cardinals right now? I mean, an onerous responsibility, yes, but in terms of who they're choosing and, whether they change to a different cardinal, what do you think is going on in there?
I think there'll be a lot of prayer and thought going on, because they'll have gone in with certain ideas, thinking, well, I know this man or this one, possibly he could be the right person. But they would have learnt a lot from the first vote that took place last night, and they'd see where some of the other interest lies. And so they'll be thinking, maybe there's someone unexpected here who got a number of votes. Could he be the right person? They'll be taking this to prayer. They'll probably be having informal conversations over coffee and over lunch if it comes to lunchtime. So there'll be definitely some adjustments and changes going on.
Yeah, someone was saying yesterday, one of our guests, that it's actually more about prayer than politics. I mean, is that really the way it is?
I think it really is, yes. I'm at the English College in the centre of Rome, and we've had Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the Archbishop of Westminster, staying with us for the last couple of weeks. And of course, we're asking him how things are going, and he's very discreet, and he wouldn't betray any secrets. But it's very clear that this is a profound spiritual journey for him and for all of the cardinals. It's not something that happens every day. They know there's an enormous focus on them, but they know how important this decision is for the Church, and not just for Catholics, for the whole world, because the Church has such a big influence in the world. So I think I've seen my own bishop, Cardinal Nichols, taking this very seriously, and we've been having a lot of prayer in the college to support him. And it's very moving to see that with our seminarians and students really being involved. Despite the focus on the cardinals, this is a process that involves the whole Church, which is beautiful to see.
And Cardinal Nichols being with you, what's that been like? He must have let something slip.
It's been very beautiful, actually. I feel like we've got to know him in a new way, because he's been having lunches and dinners and breakfasts with us. He's been leading our services. And just before the election, the day before, we had a beautiful service, a Mass, which was dedicated for the choosing of a new Pope. And he presided at that, and you could tell that he was very moved to be involved in this. And we prayed not just for the cardinals, but we prayed for whichever cardinal would be chosen as the new Pope, known to God alone, not known to us, but God knows what he's doing. And this man in particular needs the support of our prayers, even if he himself doesn't know it yet.
Do you think he would make a good Pope?
Cardinal Vincent?
Yes.
I think he'd be wonderful, but he's said to a number of people, including to us, that he feels he's the wrong age, and he's not papabile, to use that language.
Yes. Do you think age is a significant issue in all this then? Because you've got cardinals as young as 45 and cardinals obviously as old as 80 or 79, nearly 80. Do you think that's significant?
I think yes and no. And this is part of the beautiful uncertainty, if you like. Some people clearly are speaking about, it would be great to have a pope of a certain age, maybe in his early 70s, so that he's still got the energy to lead the Church, but he's not going to be here for 40 years, because for some people that feels like too long. So maybe age is a factor. But on the other hand, it comes down ultimately to the person. Are they a man of prayer? Are they a man of leadership? Are they someone who can connect us with the teaching of Christ and with the teaching of the Catholic Church? So if you like, the final profile has to be more than just age. And I wonder if they will go in, the cardinals, thinking about age in the abstract. But when it comes to it, the man will emerge. And I don't think ultimately it will be about age. It will be about the person.
Yes. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think it's a significant issue?
Well, I think that, John Paul II wasn't that old when he was chosen, and his longevity gave, I think, a very clear direction to the Roman Catholic Church. I don't think they suffered as a church for John Paul II, quite the opposite. So I think that, if, as Father Stephen explains, they do choose someone who's younger, they will choose him for the right reasons, and his leadership, they will have assessed is right for a longer time. We'll see.
We were talking about the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pizzaballa, yesterday with a guest who said the problem is he's simply too young. He's 60. Presumably the suggestion being that, you know, he could be a 30-year pope, and that wasn't something that cardinals wanted.
Well, who knows?
And I just don't agree that someone is too young or too old. I say again, it's about having the right person. And just to take Cardinal Pizzaballa as an example, all his gifts and his energy, there's risks and benefits with a slightly younger pope, and you would have more energy and possibly more dynamism, and you'd have as he grew into the papacy, then you'd have the experience of a pope who has been able to grow into the papacy, rather than someone who seems to be at the end of his ministry. So there's strengths and weaknesses, and it's very exciting seeing which way it will go.
Yes. Siobhan Robbins is down on St. Peter's Square. And Siobhan, the waiting is on again, the watching of that chimney is on again. What are people down there saying about what they're hoping for?
Well, it's been a really mixed bag. We've been talking to people over the last few days, and it seems to be a split. So we were talking to young people, young Italians, some of which have been playing this fantasy football-style game you might have heard of. It's called Fanta Papa, and basically you choose your top team of potential next popes. And all of the people we've spoken to who are playing that so far have preferred an Italian pope. They say after 47 years it's time for an Italian pope. They lean towards Suppi or Pizzaballa, who you were just talking about. So younger, more progressive candidates often. Now then, I also have been speaking to people who've come here on pilgrimages. I spoke to an American lady yesterday. She came here. She actually said, no, I want a conservative candidate. I want someone who's clear in what they want people in the Catholic Church to do. She wants to move back towards more traditional values. She felt that Pope Francis had moved away from that. And then I met a bishop who was from Argentina, and he said, actually, what I want is a moderate candidate, because I feel like the two sides of the church, the progressive and the conservative, need to be brought back together by someone moderate, a sort of calming hand. So really everyone's got a point of view, and people are really starting to pour into the square now. Yesterday, when we were in that period of waiting for the smoke, we're told there were between 45,000 and 50,000 people waiting here. I'm sure that number's going to be similar today, because when I look down the boulevard behind us where there are security checks to let people in, I can already see that it's really, really full. The space behind is slowly filling up, and everyone's looking for a sign now, because we've been told that it can be any time from around 10:30 that potentially white smoke could come in. The Cardinal's already in the Sistine Chapel voting now. And so people have been saying, oh, there's a drone up, there's a helicopter up. Unfortunately, both of those were up for about 3 hours yesterday. So they are not the signs that we're looking for, but we are all keeping our eyes peeled.
Okay, Siobhan, thank you very much indeed. And the seagulls, 2 gulls there waiting patiently, like everyone else, to see what is going on. Joining me now is the Catholic writer, speaker, commentator, Peter D. Williams. Thank you for being with us. And what do you think is going to emerge from this process? What kind of pope do you think will emerge from this process?
Well, Percy, thank you for having me. I think actually there's a phrase that goes around very often around these conclaves, which is fat pope, thin pope. And I think what that really is trying to get at is that after one particular pope who has a particular set of eccentricities in terms of his approach, it could be that this person's more of a charismatic character. It could be that they're more of a conservative, quote-unquote, character. After that, what you have is a reaction. After that, what you have is a kind of corrective, where what people are looking for, certainly the cardinals might be looking for, is someone who addresses some of the deficits that might have been in the eccentricities of the previous pope. And so what we might have with someone like Pope Francis, who in his own phrase, made a mess in many particular ways. He was someone who was quite controversial in some of his takes on issues like you might go with same-sex blessings, you might go with the synodal way of trying to govern the church through this sort of almost semi-democratic process, all of that sort of thing. Some of these were very discomforting to a lot of people, particularly I think African bishops were particularly discomforted by Fiducia Supplicans, which was the same-sex blessings document. So I think what you might find is that what they're looking for is, rather than someone who was charismatic, had a common touch, but was maybe a bit more on the quote-unquote left of things, they might look to someone for someone who has quiet orthodoxy, someone who maybe is someone like Peter Erdoğan, who is the cardinal for Esztergom, Budapest, who is someone who is very, very much more of an introvert, someone who is much less outgoing, but is also someone who's very, very solid in his orthodoxy. So that's the sort of person that they might go for. But it's extremely hard to say, because this is a conclave of cardinals who, as has been often pointed out before, don't know each other particularly well, have not met prior to the last few days. They will have got to know each other hopefully a bit more over the various congregations that took place, meetings of cardinals that took place before the conclave. They'll be meeting each other over lunch, as we've heard already, and breakfast and the like. So they'll be getting to know each other somewhat, but there'll be that natural language barrier for many of them. Not everyone is multilingual. And so it's very, very difficult to see what they'll actually come up with, simply because there's such a diverse group of people. But also, I think that what that means is that it may take longer for them to come to a decision than has hitherto been the case. I mean, we've been used to 2 or 3 days worth of conclaves before an eventual candidate is selected. Well, maybe it's going to be more like 5 days. Maybe it's going to be more like a week. We haven't had as long a conclave as that for about 100 years, just less than 100 years, really. So that would be quite a thing in and of itself.
So it's interesting. So you think that there's a pendulum swing potentially here when you talk about fat pope, thin pope. You think it could go, back to a more traditional pope in terms of style, a more conservative pope?
Indeed. I mean, it's natural for us as human beings to look at what's just happened and say, well, there are a few things that didn't go quite right there. And so therefore, let's have someone who can address those deficits. And I think that's exactly what may very well happen here. It's exactly what happened, after all, with Pope Benedict and then Pope Francis. I mean, Pope Francis was someone who was elected to take control of the Vatican, which was seen as having had a group of issues, a group of scandals to do with finances, for example. And so he came after Pope Benedict, who was much more of a quiet academic character, very gentle soul, not someone who was able to lead and take charge of a bureaucracy, of an administration. And so therefore they felt somebody needs to be in place to address those kind of issues, or at least that is what we are told. Now, whether that actually took place, whether that actually panned out that way, is another question. But irrespective, if that were the set of concerns that they had, it was because they were looking at the deficit of the previous pope. Well, again, if we're again looking at the deficit of a previous pope, I think that particularly given that a lot of the cardinals are from third world countries, they're not going to be looking for somebody who has Western secular liberal ideas in mind, but rather they're going to be looking for someone, again, who is of an ordinary orthodoxy as far as Catholics are concerned. And then also maybe somebody who is going to be just quietly competent. This was a papacy that rocked the boat quite a lot, as I say, Hayan Lago, make a mess. Well, okay, I think instead of that, maybe what they're looking for is someone who's going to be fairly quiet, steady the ship, and take things forward in a much more ordinary way, rather than the kind of ruckus that happened under the previous papacy. That's my guess, but who knows? I mean, again, the discussions that might be taking place in what is ultimately very deliberately secretive process, conclave, with key, behind closed doors, behind a locked door, it's very difficult to see until we actually get the eventual result.
Yeah, who knows? You're quite right. And it's interesting what you were just saying, the figure that the cardinals may coalesce around. And you mentioned one earlier, Peter Erdoğan from Hungary. You think, do you, that he is the kind of more conservative pope, more understated, I guess? It could be a more understated pope. You think he could be someone that they are thinking about?
Well, indeed, he's often mentioned amongst the Papal, as is Cardinal William Icke and a bunch of others. Of course, we've already heard discussion of Cardinal Pizzaballa. These are men who are, again, either who are very deliberately known to be orthodox, as we would say, conservative in worldly terms, but liberal and conservative are misleading when it comes to theological categories and Catholic categories, and we don't use that terminology. But so really more orthodox as opposed to kind of veering away from the Church's established teachings. But these are men of quiet orthodoxy, are well known in certain cases, maybe less well known in certain others, but who are not, as say, ruckus-making characters. I think that may be something that really does appeal to a lot of cardinals. There are other concerns that are going to be throughout the world. We live in a very unstable world. So maybe somebody who is very stable themselves, someone who is not going to make as much of a ruckus, compared to the last 10 years just in global politics, might be someone who I think a lot of cardinals may think it would be a good stabilizing influence on everything that the Pope has to do, not merely on a spiritual level, but also on a temporal level too.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for coming on this day. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, joining me now are the trainee Catholic priest, Makia Ahmed, and commentator at Catholic Voices, Georgia Clark, because we want to get a younger perspective on all this. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much for being with us. And Makia, I just want to start with you. Because I think you're 30, I think I'm right in saying, and I just wonder why you decided to pursue a life inside the Catholic Church.
Mainly because I tried everything that the world had to offer, many adverts and different people saying, if you get this and you will be fulfilled. And while I progressed my career and, different awards and whatnot, that fulfillment, it wasn't there. Eventually, when I turned to the Catholic faith, I realized that it wasn't a philosophy, it was the truth. Not a truth or my truth or your truth, but the truth. And, the truth will set you free, as Jesus said. And, I stand by that. Yeah.
And what hopes do you have of this conclave process?
My main hope is that we receive a shepherd who is insanely in love with the Lord. Ultimately, the church is governed by Peter, but it's under the direction of Christ, and there is divisions in the church. I know the labels being used is conservative and liberals, but that's much more of a secular sort of vocabulary. The word that we like to use is orthodox meaning right belief. That's why I want the man that I'd like to govern the church, because ultimately the one thing that can bring us all together is Christ. And I don't mean that as a platitude. I mean that is the cornerstone of our faith. So if that's one thing that can unify us, if we can find a man who not only just says the love or anything, but lives it just so fervently that it bleeds into the rest of the church, then God please, that's what I'd want.
Georgia, I saw you nodding your head there. What sort of Pope would you like to see?
Yeah, so much of what Makia has just said. We want to see someone who is a clear communicator of the gospel, someone who's able to, I think, unite the church and who's a faithful follower of Christ. Young people are so disillusioned with leaders who are more about themselves or more about the institutions that they lead rather than the reason. And the reason we have a Pope is because we have someone who is able to be a successor of St. Peter who laid his life down for Jesus. And we want someone to aspire to. We want someone who's able to show us what it means to be Jesus in 2025 and beyond.
What did you think of Pope Francis as the leader of the Catholic Church?
I thought he was a good example of Christ as the Good Shepherd. I think he was able to stoop low in humility. He washed the feet of people from other faiths. He washed an all-female inmates at the local prison in Rome one year. He spoke openly against war, and he really tackled issues of justice in a way that I thought was not so political, but really speaking to human dignity. And I loved his pastoral side. And so people have been saying, do we need a scholar? Do we need a pastor? And ultimately, I think it would be great to have both, but no one is Jesus. So we will see what happens.
Makia, would you like to see a pope in the mould of Pope Francis?
Yeah, I think one of the great bits about Pope Francis, as Georgia was getting at, is his pastoral side. He has a certain, dare I say, messiness to the way they went about things, which is exciting at times and also at times makes you very nervous. But he was fundamentally all in. He was just completely and utterly just, in love with Christ. And the way that sort of came out in different ways is just, it's incredible. I have no preferences. I'm trying to tell myself, just someone who, pastoral and scholar, bring them together.
Georgia, how important is it for you to have a pope who supports the role of women in the church?
I think it's incredibly important. Women have a great role to play in the life of the church. As Pope Benedict reminded all lay people, we are co-responsible with our clergy for the life and holiness of the church. I've been impressed by how Pope Francis has been appointing women in leadership roles within the Vatican. I'm not looking to change the fact that the priesthood is for men. I respect that. I love that. I think it's a great gift of the church. But I would like to see other roles for women that are recognised, that are celebrated, and creative ways that we're going to see in the future.
So just to explain that, I'm interested in that. Why wouldn't you support the ordination of women? I just wonder what your rationale is. Just explain that to our viewers.
Sure. So as I understand it, these men are reflecting Christ, and Christ intentionally appointed male apostles. But sort of more than that, I think of them as spiritual fathers. And so if you were asking me, would you like to be a father? It just kind of doesn't make sense to me. It's not something that's inside of me that I would like. I know that there are some women who would like to see that. But personally, and I think many of the people that I know, many faithful Catholics who are women, don't want to see that kind of change. It's not the thing that they're interested in. We would like to see a sort of maternal figure rise up in the church who is a mother herself. But no, I'm not looking to change. Wouldn't like the Pope to change the role of the priesthood, which is spiritual fatherhood. It's not something that would make sense for a woman.
Okay, just finally, from each of you, maybe just a name who you would like to see. I mean, look, you don't have to answer. Makia, is there someone particularly you would like to see?
None particularly, sort of like everyone else. I've sort of learned about these cardinals in the last sort of, month, a few weeks or so. I have read the work of Cardinal Serra, which is wonderful, and it kind of makes me sad, actually, that he's sort of been depicted as this conservative or mean sort of person, because when you read his work, he has such a loving way of communicating the doctrines and dogmas of the church. So that's someone I really much admire. If it's to be him, who knows, but yeah.
Yeah, and Georgia, anyone particular?
I'll put a name out there because I just want whoever the Lord wants. There are some cardinals whose lives I've been learning about that I find incredibly impressive, that they've touched my heart as I've read about their lives. I've met a few cardinals, and so I know Cardinal Nichols, obviously the Archbishop of Westminster here in the UK. I've also met Cardinal Tagle, who spoke to young people in the UK a couple of years ago at a big event called Flame. So there are people who I certainly wouldn't be disappointed about, yeah, we'll just see what the Lord wants and how he reveals himself over the next coming days or votes, or perhaps possibly sooner.
All right, very good to talk to you both. Georgia, thanks very much indeed. And Makia, also, thank you for coming on the programme. Joining us now is Brendan Walsh, editor at The Tablet. Good morning, thanks very much for being with us. And do you expect white smoke anytime soon?
We'll have smoke twice, very likely today. We had black smoke last night, and it appeared about an hour and a half later than what we were expecting. And there was a lot of mystery about why that was. And one reason is there are a lot more of them than there's ever been before. There are 133, and the nature of the way that they vote means that these guys, 60, 70, have to step up at slow pace to individually put their votes in a bowl, and it'll take quite a long time. Another reason was that there was a sermon before they started, which was scheduled to last for 10 or 15 minutes. And as sermons sometimes do, it went on for rather longer, apparently more than an hour. So that was how we had late smoke last night. But there's no sermons this morning. There'll be one ballot, and then if that doesn't reach the 2/3, the 89 required, there'll be a second ballot pretty quickly afterwards. And then the votes, the papers are all bundled up, stuck in the stove, and it's very unlikely, it hasn't happened for a long, long time, that there would be a pope elected on the third ballot. It might happen, but I think it's unlikely. And that means we're likely to have black smoke at around lunchtime today. And then they have their lunch, and then they bus back in for the afternoon session, and another 2 votes. And so the 5th vote in the past has brought a result the last couple of times, but it could go on longer than that. It might be go on tomorrow. So I don't know, but we could have white smoke tonight at about 6 o'clock, something like that. But I don't know, toss a coin, and then you have the same thing tomorrow.
Yeah. And I mean, the 133 cardinals, many of them appointed by Pope Francis.
Most of them. Yeah.
And for good reasons that he was talking about, that he wanted cardinals in different countries. He wanted more cardinals
70 different countries
of the global south.
Yeah.
Exactly. So is that a good thing that he's done this, or does it actually just lead to too many cardinals and it complicates things somewhat?
Yeah, it certainly complicates things, but of course it's a fabulous thing. Even in my lifetime, most of the cardinals, they weren't just European, but the majority were Italian. 1958, 1963, most of them were Italian. So it's just representative of the change, the way that the church is so different now. It's a global church, and the cardinals reflect that. And there were always big cities that would inevitably have a cardinal, places like Los Angeles or New York or whatever. And New York has a cardinal, but some of these traditional places no longer have cardinals. And there are cardinals from Papua New Guinea and, you know, all the rest of it, which is fabulous. It's great. But that does mean that they don't necessarily know each other as much as they did. And they'll be looking, I'm almost sure that the great majority of them will be looking for someone who will continue in the direction of Pope Francis. I think there's very little doubt about that. The difference, I think, will that some of them, a few, I'd say minority, will be wanting to put their foot on the accelerator. There will be a few, and again, I think this is a very few, who will want to put the car into reverse. There are a few of those, and they have their champions who just don't like the direction that Francis has gone in. Most of them, I think, will want to go forward in the same direction, but with a little more attention, perhaps, to the rules of the road, a little bit more caution, want things perhaps to be, as Makir said earlier, a little bit less messy. And there are different candidates, different cardinals, if you like, represent acceleration, candidates who represent going into reverse. And then there are candidates who, if you like, represent cautious reform, same direction. The doors that the Pope Francis gently opened, some would like them slammed shut, some would like to charge through them, and others, I think, would just like to keep them open and keep the conversation going. And I think it's that centre ground is where we're likely to get the new Pope from? I don't know. That's a question. I'm guessing, but that's my sense, is that they'll want the direction of Pope Francis, but things to be just a little bit less messy. And that means to me that they, and you were asking earlier about names, and I don't know. But I can give you a few names if you like.
Well, we're running out. Well, yeah, give me two names.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you a name who I think will get it and the name I'd like. The one I'd like, there's a fantastic Filipino cardinal called David, who I think will give us inspiration. He's a scholar. He bravely stood up to this appalling President Duterte. I think he'd be fantastic. But I think they might go for the cautious, the number 2, Parolin, Pietro Parolin. He's known to them all. He's incredibly competent, cautious. He could be the man. Let's see.
All right, many thanks. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you. Just a couple of minutes with Alistair Bruce and Father Stephen here. Well, it's interesting where to start with those guests. I'm interested, Father Stephen, in the guest who said, well, there's this pendulum thing going on, the fat Pope, thin Pope going on, and we will revert, or the cardinals will want to revert. What's your view?
Well, I thought that was a really interesting phrase he used. Yes, fat Pope, thin Pope. And we see that in religion, in politics and society. I think that there could be some truth about that in terms of style. But I think, as we've just heard from Brendan Walsh there, people will be wanting to hold on to the really positive things of the legacy of Pope Francis. Just to pick one, Pope Francis's incredible openness to others and to the poor and to people outside the church. I mean, that door has been opened, and I don't think anyone will want to close that. The question is how we present the Catholic faith with integrity, as well as reaching out to those beyond the church. Right. And that's an open question.
And Alistair, at the end there, just talking about how many votes, and he was talking about 5 votes is quite, a common thing, which would mean the last vote this evening, wouldn't it?
It's impossible to tell, but yes, it could well be this evening. It could be any minute now. We'll wait and find out.
Yeah. OK, and in the meantime, all eyes will be on the chimney, and you can see it there on the right of your screen. And the voting is taking place. We could get some sort of smoke right now or in the next hour or so, but much more likely later. We'll be back at the top of the hour.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.